Before we begin, let's slow everything down. You're not here to learn dates, or memorize rules, or keep track of every name. This channel exists for quiet watching, for long stories told gently, from a distance where nothing is urgent. We walk through strange worlds and broken timelines the way Prismo watches them from the center of time, calmly, patiently, letting moments unfold without rushing them. If you're still awake and you want more journeys like this waiting for you later, you can quietly subscribe or leave a like, a small signal to keep these timelines playing. And if you're already drifting, that's perfect. Let's begin. The universe has not begun yet. There are no stars, no gods, no heroes, no names. Just a quiet, starless void, and in the middle of it, something vast is breathing. Slow, tidal, like a world serpent turning over in its sleep at the bottom of a cosmic ocean that hasn't decided to be water yet. You can't see its whole body. No one ever can. You catch hints of coils, like Tiamat's shadow, like Jormungandr's outline, like every nightmare your ancestors whispered about, pressed into one enormous drowsy shape. Reality is still soft here, like wet clay, and each breath it takes sends ripples through existence that does not quite exist. Think about that for a second. The first heartbeat you're hearing is not a god's, not a hero's, but chaos itself, testing out the rhythm it will use to threaten every timeline that comes after. Here is the thing. It is not roaring. It is not attacking. It is dozing. Chaos is an old, drowsy dragon, folded around the center of time before time has a center, wrapped in darkness that lies over it like a heavy, warm blanket. When it exhales, the void feels thick, almost velvety, like the multiverse is going to be woven from this texture later. When it inhales, there's a slow pull, as if every possible universe is a wish it hasn't decided to grant or swallow. If you listen closely, beneath those tidal heartbeats, there is another sound, the tiniest crackle, like a candle that hasn't been lit yet already remembering how to flicker. That is early human fear, waiting in the wings. One day, that little spark will tell stories about this dragon and call it Tiamat or Leviathan or the serpent encircling the world. One day people will write demon lists on clay tablets like a cosmic phone book, carefully naming spirits so they feel less huge. But right now, that fear is just a possibility, a future shiver in the dark. Let's start right here, at the edge of creation, in the moment just before anyone shows up to fight anything. No Marduk with his storm winds, no gods cutting dragons in half to build the sky, no apocalypses scheduled, no final purification on the calendar of time. Just a question hanging in the dark. Will this coiled chaos devour everything that might be, or will it become the building material of the universe itself? We're going to sit with that question for a bit. Not to summon anything, not to wake it up. In this video, we're going to file the teeth off every ancient evil we meet, from this first sleeping serpent to the last demon fading out at the end of the world, and turn them into a very long, very slow bedtime story about power, fear, and desire. So lie back, close your eyes, if you want. You are a tiny observer floating a safe distance away, watching chaos turn over in its sleep. The darkness around you is not a threat, it's a blanket. The monsters are not at the door, they are distant, mythic prototypes, still half-dream. We are just going to trace how every culture tried to name this danger, and in naming it, made it smaller, softer, almost gentle. The heartbeats keep rolling through the void, slower now, more like waves on a shore that hasn't been drawn yet. Stay with that sound, because from here, the whole history of ancient evils is about to unfold, and you do not have to be afraid of any of it. What counts as an ancient evil, really? So let's start by answering the obvious question, What actually counts as an ancient evil in this universe of stories you're drifting through right now? Because we're not just talking about one demon with a pitchfork and a marketing team. We're going to move through a whole multiverse of fears that people turned into characters so they could look at them without falling apart. Here is the thing. In this video, ancient evil is an umbrella term, a soft blanket thrown over a few very specific shapes in the dark. First, there are the primordial chaos creatures, the Tiamats and world serpents, those vast dragons and oceans that existed before the rules of reality were written. Then there are demons and tempters, the Satans and whispering spirits from Zoroastrianism, early Christianity, Islam, and a dozen other timelines trying to tug human desire off course. We'll visit cursed names and forbidden books, underworld guardians who stand at the gates, and world-ending beasts that only wake up when the universe's alarm clock goes off. On the surface, they look wildly different. A Mesopotamian demon catalogued like a cosmic phone book entry, a Norse serpent wrapped around the world, an Egyptian name chipped off a wall as a kind of spiritual execution. But think about that for a second. Underneath, they all map back onto the same cluster of fears: hunger, disease, the night, death, being forgotten, losing control of your own mind. The monster is the outline of the anxiety, the silhouette of the worry that was already there. So the emotional stakes here are not jump scare horror, no sudden loud noises, no shock cuts. What you're really hearing is a record of what our ancestors were afraid of when the fire burned low. Loneliness becomes a demon that tempts you away from your people. Famine becomes a devouring dragon. The terror of meaningless death becomes an underworld judge weighing your heart against a feather. They turned raw panic into narrative so that even if the universe was hostile, at least it had characters, motives, and a plot. We're also going to take a slow philosophical walk through all of this. When did humans first decide that evil was not just bad luck, but a conscious force with a plan? Why do so many myths, from Zoroastrian endings to apocalyptic beasts, circle back to the same darkness at the end of time, only to promise some kind of purification or rebirth? Each monster is basically a dramatized worry, a wish in reverse. Not, may this happen, but please, let this never happen. And because this is a bedtime journey, we need to be clear, we are not glorifying cruelty or suffering. We're studying these stories like fossils under soft lamplight at the center of time. Turn them over, name their shapes, and they lose most of their power. By the end, many of these so-called ancient evils will feel oddly small, sleepy, even a little sympathetic, like retired villains who mostly want a blanket and some tea. To keep you from getting lost, there are rules to our path. We'll start with the oldest chaos tales, those pre-creation oceans and dragons. Then we'll move into demons and tempters, then curses and forbidden texts, and finally the great apocalypses and quiet rebirths. On the other side, you can drift in and out. The structure will still be here when you return. This is not a maze, it's a guided tour of the dark, with the lights dimmed low, and the next stop is the first time humans met the cosmic ocean and decided to call it a monster. Tonight's map through the dark. Your bedtime roadmap. So tonight's map through the dark looks big and cosmic, but it's actually very simple. We're going to walk in widening circles, out from the first chaos at the edge of reality, and back again to your pillow. No jump scares, no narrative whiplash. Just a slow orbit around the idea of evil until it feels less like a threat and more like background noise. Let's start with the oldest monsters anyone bothered to write down. The primordial chaos beasts, Tiamat in Babylon, whose body is torn apart and rearranged into the architecture of the world. World serpents like Jormungandr, coiled around the universe, biting its own tail like a cosmic Ouroboros stress toy. We'll tell their stories first. At full volume, Then dial everything down and ask what people were really afraid of. Not just a dragon, not just a snake, but the terrifying possibility that order is temporary and the ocean underneath it all wants its universe back. From there, we move into personified moral evil, where temptation gets a face and a job description. Here is the thing. Satan does not arrive fully formed with horns and a pitchfork. We'll follow the timeline from neutral daemons in the ancient Mediterranean to Zoroastrian tempters to the long, slow process that turns ambiguous spirits into Christian demons. Lilith will drift through this part like a recurring dream, shifting from night demon to first wife to symbol of unruly desire, depending on who is telling the story and what they need her to be. After that, the power shifts to language itself. Cursed words, forbidden texts, names you are not supposed to say out loud. We'll open clay tablets and grimoires that treated magic like household technology. A recipe here, a prayer there, a casual curse for your enemies in the margins. We'll talk about why ancient Egyptians thought erasing a name was a kind of spiritual execution, and why, in this video, we're going to handle those names like fragile glass and then gently set them back on the shelf. Then we sink into nightmare creatures and underworld guardians. Not just Cerberus at the gate, but the quiet, heavy presences that sit on your chest at night and turn breathing into work. We'll look at proto-Lovecraftian sea horrors, Mesopotamian demon lists that read like a cosmic phone book, and all the guardians who are technically terrifying, but also, if you squint, just very dedicated security employees. Think about that for a second. The monster under the bed as overqualified night shift. Finally, we'll open the big cycle, apocalypses and renewals. Jörmungandr rising at the end of time, Tiamat's chaos threatening to seep back through the cracks, Zoroastrian universes scheduled for purification like a cosmic deep clean. Again and again, evil ends the world. Again and again, the world restarts. All the way through, we'll keep circling the same questions. What is evil? Why does it return? Why do we keep giving it a face, a name, a mailing address in the multiverse? If you drift off during Tiamat and wake up during Lilith, that's fine. The questions will still be here, waiting, like low-level background music. So here is your bedtime rule set. You don't have to remember everything. Just mentally bookmark any myth that catches on your mind like a loose thread. You can always come back later, more awake, and pull on it. For now, your only job is to listen as each ancient terror walks on stage at full cosmic power. Then slowly, gently, yawns, curls up at the foot of your bed, and falls asleep before you do. Get cozy in the catacombs, a gentle invitation so as that last monster curls up at the foot of your bed and starts doing its tiny cosmic snores. This is the moment where you get to do the practical, very human part of the ritual. Adjust your pillow. Let your shoulders sink down a little. If there's a light still on across the room or a notification glaring at you from another timeline, this is your gentle reminder you're allowed to dim it, mute it, turn the universe down a notch. Here is the thing. This video is not meant to be consumed like a lecture at the center of time. It's designed to be half heard, half dreamed. So if you can, set your device to the lowest comfortable volume, place it face down or a little out of reach, and just let the words blur at the edges. You don't need to stare at the screen to absorb the shape of these ancient evils. You can let them drift past like constellations you're only vaguely tracking with your eyes closed. And if you find yourself liking this pace, these long, slow dives into myth and lore that move with the rhythm of breathing rather than the rhythm of an algorithm, then in this video and others, we're going to keep doing exactly that. Think about that for a second. A whole little corner of the multiverse where the rules say that the point is not hype, not shock, but rest. If that sounds like a place you'd like to revisit on restless nights, you might want to subscribe so that more of these bedtime epics are already waiting in your queue when sleep refuses to grant your wish. Pattern interrupt. This is also a collaboration, not between gods and demons, but between you and the script. If there is a myth, a demon, an ancient curse, or even a supposedly forbidden name that has been renting space in your brain at 3 a.m., you can leave it in a comment. We will take it, hold it up to the light, and in that specifically Adventure Time way, file its teeth down in a future bedtime story. Your private little horrors can become tomorrow's calm, over-explained narrative. And if you're already drifting, if parts of this are starting to smear together into one long, low murmur, that is not a failure. This is not homework. You do not get graded on completion. If you fall asleep before we reach the last demon or the final apocalypse, the video will still be here in the morning, patiently looping in digital existence while you reset your nervous system. So let's start settling back into the narrative. You're tucked in, the volume is low, the outside universe can wait. Now that you're settled, let's go back to the very first monsters that ever opened their eyes in the dark at the edge of creation, and see how they learned to live there. Before good and evil, chaos is the first monster. So let's start before there were demons, before there were devils, before anyone had invented the idea of being evil on purpose. You pull back past history, past planets, past the first nervous mammals looking up at the sky, and you land in a universe that is not a story yet. No heroes, no villains, just a kind of dangerous, humming potential. In a lot of ancient myths, that's where existence begins, not with a kind god smiling down from the center of time, but with a shapeless, slightly menacing presence. A dark ocean that goes on forever. A serpent coiled around reality before reality knows its reality. A dragon sleeping in the multiverse's throat. The Greeks just called it chaos, a yawning gap, a cosmic open mouth where direction, meaning, and even up versus down haven't loaded in yet. Here is the thing. Chaos is not a polite blank slate. It's not a clean white screen waiting for a wish. It's more like a storm that doesn't know where its edges are. The Babylonians looked at the same terrifying fertile mess and named her Tiamat. She is the salt sea, the bitter water, the dragon mother whose body is basically the raw code of the universe. When the younger gods overthrow her, they don't just defeat a monster, they perform cosmic urban planning. Her ribs become the architecture of the sky, her lower body becomes the earth, her eyes become rivers, her drool becomes clouds, her torn carcass is stretched into the framework that holds time, weather, and geography in place. The enemy is literally the building material. The terrifying presence you had to kill is now the ceiling over your head and the ground under your feet. Think about that for a second. We're going to sit with that ambiguity because it's important. Tiamat is a threat. She roars, she floods, she drowns. But she's also the only available resource. The universe doesn't get to exist without her. Chaos in these stories is not evil the way a scheming villain is evil. It's wild, unpredictable power, like the sea in a storm or electricity before you invent insulation. It can kill you, it can feed you. Sometimes in the same afternoon, for early humans, that wasn't abstract philosophy. It was daily weather. Floods wiped out villages, but the same rivers watered crops. Night was full of predators and panic, but also sleep, dreams, and the reset of your nervous system. So of course those forces turn into moody beings, dragons under the ocean, serpents circling the world, gaps in the sky you could talk to, appease, or in a mythic timeline, battle. And here, quietly, is where this touches you in bed. Right now. Some fears don't arrive as tidy villains. They just feel like formless pressure, like emotional Tiamat humming under your personal reality. Too big, too vague, a storm with no map. Naming them is the first primitive magic. Once you say, "This is anxiety," or "This is grief," you've drawn a shoreline around the ocean. You haven't slain the dragon, but you've sketched its outline. Because once chaos has a name, myths can start deciding what to do with it. Do you negotiate with the serpent, chain it, worship it, or pretend it's gone while it keeps moving under the floorboards of existence? In the next part, those choices solidify into something sharper. Not just chaos, but intention. Not just storms, but tempters. The first beings who wake up in the dark and, in that specifically Adventure Time way, want you to fall. Dragons that become worlds. Tiamat, Leviathan, and their kin. So you have this raw, formless serpent under the floorboards of existence. And now people start doing something very strange with it. They turn it into architecture. They turn it into weather. They turn it into the ceiling above your head. Let's start in Babylon, where the universe opens with a family argument in the ocean. In the Enuma Elish, before there are cities or kings or even a calendar, there is Tiamat, saltwater, chaos, the restless sea at night. Younger gods make noise, break the cosmic quiet, and the old waters rise up. Tiamat becomes a dragon, a storm serpent, marching into battle with a legion of monsters at her side. And a younger storm god, Marduk, steps forward with his own wish. He will fight her if he gets to rule the universe afterward. Here is the thing. The fight is loud, but the aftermath is domestic. Marduk kills Tiamat, cuts her body in half, and very calmly uses one half to roof the world as sky, and the other half to floor it as land. He pins her with mountains, nails the constellations into her skin, and turns a slain dragon into a sort of cosmic drywall. Your entire reality in that story is someone's dead sea monster, carefully repurposed. Now drift west along the same coastline and the same sea, and you meet Leviathan. In Hebrew tradition, Leviathan is that same kind of primordial sea dragon, a knot of waves and teeth out beyond where the fishermen want to think about. God does not die fighting it. God just subdues it, plays with it, promises to feed it to the righteous at the end of time. Later readers push it harder toward capital E, evil, a moral villain, a proto-devil. But under that, you can still feel the older fear. Not sin, just storm. Not wickedness, just an ocean that does not care if your boat comes back. If you zoom out over the region like a slow pan across a multiverse of clay tablets, you keep seeing the same outline. In Ugarit, there is Lotan, the twisting serpent with 7 heads. In neighboring myths, there are other chaos serpents, other world-coiling dragons, always living where maps get vague and the coastline frays. Different languages, different rules, same basic worry. The sea and the sky can kill you without warning. And yet, they are necessary. Without Tiamat's body, there is no world. Without the sea, no fish, no trade routes, no rain. These monsters are terrifying, but they are also the raw material of existence itself, the cosmic compost heap you grow order out of. Think about that for a second. Every safe harbor is carved out of something that wanted to drown you. We're going to watch that ambivalence evolve. As time moves, this amoral weather dragon starts to pick up a personality, then a motive, then a moral agenda. The storm gets promoted to tempter. The coastline becomes a contract. And the next serpents we meet will not just break your boat. In that specifically Adventure Time way, they will try to break your will. Serpents circling the world, your Monganda and the loop of fear. So let's start with the biggest upgrade a storm can get. It stops being weather and becomes architecture. In Norse myth, that promotion goes to Jormungandr, the world serpent. You can picture it easily in the dark. A serpent so enormous it lives in the ocean, coils around the entire planet, and bites its own tail. Not moving, not striking, just holding. On the surface, that looks like security, a ring around reality, a cosmic seatbelt. The ocean isn't just chaos anymore. It has a visible edge, a living border that says, this is where the world ends. But here is the thing. That same ring is also a noose. If it ever tightens or loosens, the world changes. The line between protective and predatory is literally one jaw unclenching. Think about that for a second. Your entire existence quietly circled by a reptile that is both guardian and hostage taker. In the Norse timeline, there is an appointment on the calendar, Ragnarok. One day, with the same inevitability as sunrise, Jormungandr lets go of its tail. It rises from the sea, the ocean boiling around it, venom spilling into the air until the sky itself becomes toxic. It doesn't sneak up on anyone. This is not a jump scare. This is a scheduled cosmic exhale, a universe that has been holding its breath for ages, finally breathing out poison. The serpent meets Thor, and they kill each other, because of course they do. That is the rule of their existence. Equal and opposite, locked into a duel that has been pending since the first coil closed. And if that image of a tail-biting serpent feels familiar, it should. The Ouroboros shows up everywhere. Egyptian tomb art, Greek philosophy, Gnostic diagrams that look like someone tried to screenshot the multiverse with a single circle. A creature eating its own tail, dying and feeding itself at the same time. It is birth, death, and rebirth compressed into one looped animation. Ancient evils in these stories rarely vanish. They go off-screen. They sink under the waves, curl up beneath the world, or get sealed in a jar just waiting for their next turn at the center of time. We're going to gently zoom that out to you, because your fears do something similar. They don't obey linear time, they move in circles. A worry fades, then returns in a new costume. An old anxiety about the dark becomes a new anxiety about the future. It is not that you failed to defeat it. It is that your inner universe, like the outer one, runs on cycles. Myths like Jormungandr gave people a way to say, of course the dread came back. That's what it does. The serpent isn't a personal moral failure. It's just the weather pattern of existence. And this looping serpent is our preview. Because from here, we'll drift into apocalypses and world ages, into Zoroastrian countdowns where evil has an expiration date, and into myths where the end of the world is also the construction manual for the next one. The ring will break, the sky will burn, and then, in that specifically Adventure Time way, someone will quietly ask what we wish for when the universe resets. From storms to villains, when chaos learns your name, the ring will break, the sky will burn, but before you get your universe reset, something quieter happens. The chaos starts learning your name. Let's start with the moment storms stop being just weather and start being someone. Early on, lightning is just this violent glitch in reality, an error message from the sky. But give it a name, Zeus, Indra, Thor, and suddenly it's not an error, it's a relationship. You can leave offerings, you can complain, you can imagine that the universe is not just smashing you at random, it's talking back. Here is the thing. Once you name a force, you give it a face. And once it has a face, it can stare back at you. Tiamat is not the ocean is scary. Tiamat is a dragon mother whose body becomes the architecture of the world after she's killed. Think about that for a second. A storm can't hold a grudge. A dragon can. A nameless flood can't negotiate. A river god can demand a temple, punish a broken vow, reward a well-timed prayer with rain instead of famine. So we're going to zoom in from the big dragons to the small local presences that crowd around early humans like an invisible neighborhood watch. Winds pick up guardians, springs get nymphs, crossroads acquire tricksters who might guide you to treasure or to your extremely preventable death. In Mesopotamia, they literally start cataloging spirits like a cosmic phone book, lists of demons and protectors, each with a job description. The multiverse of your village becomes busy, overfull. Every corner has a supervisor, and weirdly, that's comforting. These spirits can be moody, petty, territorial, but at least they have moods. At least there are rules. You can't bargain with entropy, but you can bargain with a thing in the old tree. Offer bread, whisper a wish, hope the guardian of the crossroads is in a good mood tonight and not in their accidental disappearance era. This is the emotional pivot. Instead of being crushed by blind fate, people imagine themselves in a network of cosmic social obligations. You're not just a victim of existence. You're a bad neighbor if you don't pour out the first drink, if you don't light the candle, if you say the wrong name at the wrong time. The universe becomes less like a storm and more like a small town with infinite gossip. And once chaos has personalities, stories change. These beings don't just knock things over, they enforce a kind of narrative justice. Break an oath, a river spirit drowns you. Show hospitality, a wandering god reveals themselves and blesses your timeline. They become characters in morality plays, early prototypes for villains and anti-heroes, not just hazards in the background. But there's a pattern forming under all these local arrangements. Beneath the swarm of named winds and crossroads spirits, people start to feel a single pressure, like a storm front behind the weather. If there can be many small guardians of order, could there also be one vast opponent of order itself? In the next turn of the story, the universe will answer that with a new invention. Not just many spirits, but a cosmic rival, an organized, personified evil that doesn't just haunt your village, it challenges the architecture of reality. Twin powers, Zoroaster's cosmic contest between good and evil. So the universe takes a breath, looks at all these scattered spirits and half-formed monsters, and then does something new. It promotes evil, not just to a louder thunderstorm or a bigger snake, but to a rival CEO of reality itself. Let's start in ancient Iran, with Zoroastrianism, where the cosmos is suddenly framed like a very slow, very high-stakes court case. On one side, Ahura Mazda, the wise lord, radiant, ordering time, wanting truth, firelight, clean water, honest contracts. On the other, Angra Mainyu, later called Ahriman, a destructive spirit who looks at that blueprint of a good universe and basically says, no, not by accident, by choice. Here is the thing. Before this, a lot of your mythic enemies are chaos in animal form. Tiamat the dragon, primordial oceans, serpents that encircle the world and squeeze. They are dangerous, but they are not holding press conferences about their moral platform. Zoroastrianism upgrades the threat. Angra Mainyu is not just wild, he is willful, a conscious force whose desire is to corrupt everything good Ahura Mazda wishes into its ugliest mirror image. So the universe becomes a moral battlefield, not just a weather report. Every fire you light, every promise you keep, every time you tell the truth instead of the convenient lie, you are, in this system, literally participating in a cosmic war. You, brushing your teeth and trying not to be terrible, are enlisted on the side of the wise lord against the destructive spirit. Think about that for a second. Ordinary existence, the tiny timeline of your day, is plugged into a multiverse-scale conflict. But then Zoroastrianism does something surprisingly gentle. It puts an expiration date on evil. This is not an eternal stalemate at the center of time. This is a long, finite struggle with rules and an outcome that has already been spoiler tagged in the scriptures. At the end of the story, Ahura Mazda wins, the universe is purified, the dead are resurrected, and Angra Mainyu is permanently neutralized, like a toxin finally filtered out of the bloodstream of reality. Evil is terrifying. Evil is vast. Evil is also on a timer. That idea will echo. We're going to see it ripple into later Jewish apocalyptic thought, where a more organized Satan starts to look less like a courtroom prosecutor and more like a cosmic enemy. Into Christianity, where demons line up as an army under one dark commander, and history bends toward an end of days. Into Islam, where Iblis and his followers tempt, whisper, oppose, but do so within a story that still belongs to God. One adversary, many agents, one eventual defeat. And if you are lying in the dark, listening to ancient evils like bedtime stories, there is a quiet comfort hidden here. You can imagine your fear the way Zoroastrians imagined Angra Mainyu, real, dangerous, whispering in the corners of your mind, but not ultimate, not forever. A phase of the universe, not the point of the universe. A long night with dawn scheduled. In that specifically Adventure Time way, it's almost like the cosmos has already filed the paperwork for evil's retirement. We're just waiting for the last shift to end. From diamonds to demons, how neutral spirits got a bad reputation, so if evil is on a cosmic retirement plan, that raises a quiet, unsettling question as you're drifting off. What happens to all the smaller names on the payroll? Not just Angra Mainyu or Satan, but the background characters of the multiverse. The Whisperers, the Guides, the ones that were here before the job title Demon even existed. Let's start with the Greek daimon. Not a horned monster, not a cartoon devil with a pitchfork, more like a spiritual middle manager of reality, an intermediary presence moving between gods and humans, nudging the timeline without owning it. Socrates famously said he had a personal daemon, a voice that never told him what to do, only what not to do, like a cosmic maybe don't notification popping up whenever he was about to make a really bad wish with his own life. Here is the thing. In that older Greek imagination, daimons lived in a morally mixed neighborhood. Some were protective, attached to a person or a city, like a guardian process quietly running in the background of existence. Some were inspiring, associated with genius, poetry, the sudden flash of desire that changes your entire path. Some were troublesome, sure, but more like spiritual raccoons than ultimate embodiments of evil, knocking over the trash cans of your plans at inconvenient times. They weren't locked into a strict good/evil binary. They were about role, not alignment. A daimon of love could ruin you or save you, depending on how you handled it. A daimon of madness might look like a curse from one angle and a doorway to prophecy from another. Think about that for a second. The same category of being could be your patron, your saboteur, or your weird muse, all depending on context and timing. But then the religious operating system of the Mediterranean gets an update. Monotheism spreads. You move from a crowded divine bureaucracy to a universe with a single all-good God at the center of time. And suddenly, all those ambiguous spirits need new job titles. We're going to simplify the cosmic org chart. Some older beings get rebranded upward as angels. Others, especially the unruly local or non-compliant ones, slide down into the emerging demon folder. Language follows power. Daimon becomes demon, and the word itself starts to curdle. What used to mean an in-between presence, a mediator of fate, collapses into a shorthand for pure malevolence. The nuance drains out. The timelines where a daimon could be your guardian or your conscience get overwritten by the popular imagination, which now hears demon and fills in horns, sulfur, and an interest in your immortal credit score. And here is the quietly comforting twist. A lot of the ancient evils haunting our cultural bedtime stories are really just older spirits who lost a branding war. They were caught in the crossfire of shifting theologies, swept from grey into black because the new cosmic rules demanded a cleaner contrast. The universe did not suddenly generate more monsters, it just relabeled the same presences under a harsher light, which means as we move deeper into this night tour of horror, we have to ask, when you hear the word demon in a grimoire or a possession story, are you meeting a pure enemy of creation or a demoted civil servant of the sacred, still doing the job no one remembers correctly? Hold that question, because the next layer down is older than Greek, older than angels, and it lives in the dark water before the world has a name. Satan's many costumes, from prosecutor to prince of darkness. So we come up from that dark water, and instead of dragons and sea serpents, we meet something quieter, almost bureaucratic. A word. Satan. Not yet a caped villain at the center of time, not the CEO of hell. Just a label for an adversary. In early Hebrew texts, Satan is a common noun, a job description. An accuser, a legal opponent, someone who stands in your way. Let's start with that courtroom. In the book of Job, the Satan isn't sneaking around with a pitchfork. He walks into the divine council like a cosmic prosecutor clocking in for a shift. He questions Job's motives, tests loyalty, pushes the edges of the rules, but he still works within God's jurisdiction. He is not evil. He is not independent. He is just bound to argue the hard cases in a universe where desire and devotion need to be examined under pressure. Here is the thing. The serpent in Eden is never called Satan in the text. It's just a talking snake who twists a command into an invitation, bending reality with a very small, very precise wish. You will be like God. Later readers look back and start drawing lines. The tempter in the garden, the accuser in Job, the adversaries who block kings and prophets. What if they're all the same character, seen at different angles on the timeline? Over centuries, scattered adversaries begin to crystallize. In apocalyptic literature, especially around the time when empires are stomping across Israel's history, you start getting dragons, star-falling rebels, named opponents of God's order. The Satan role stretches. It absorbs serpent imagery, chaos monster echoes, and courtroom language until you get something like a cosmic district attorney who has quietly rewritten his job description into Prince of Darkness. Think about that for a second. A title promotion powered almost entirely by interpretation. Contact with dualistic traditions, like Zoroastrianism's cosmic battle between Ahura Mazda and Angra Mainyu, turns up the contrast. If the universe feels like a war zone between light and dark, then having a single focused antagonist makes emotional sense. You get an almost mirrored power facing God across the battlefield of existence. A being who can touch every timeline, whisper into every wish, explain why injustice keeps winning even when the rules say the righteous should prosper. And narratively, it is so convenient. A lone villain cleans up the script. Instead of 1,000 small causes, economics, trauma, bad kings, random chaos, you can say, the devil made me do it, and move on. Stories love that. Preachers love that. Your anxious midnight brain trying to map the multiverse of human cruelty loves that. But this evolution also gives the game away. Evil is flexible. It can be a prosecutor, a snake, a dragon, a fallen angel, a tempter in a desert. It can live in cosmic courts or in the quiet pressure of your own desire. And as we follow this character into later traditions, we're going to watch him keep changing costumes, because the next stop is where the Prince of Darkness starts needing contracts, hierarchies, and a whole infernal bureaucracy to manage his growing reputation. Demons as cosmic bureaucrats, catalogues, hierarchies, and job descriptions. So if the Prince of Darkness now needs contracts and hierarchies, here is the thing. You can't run an infernal empire on vibes alone. At some point, someone has to write it down. Long before medieval Europe imagined demons arguing over jurisdiction, Mesopotamian scribes were already at their clay desks, pressing tiny wedges into tablets, building what is basically the first cosmic spreadsheet of unseen predators. Let's start there. In the libraries of places like Nineveh and Uruk, you get demon lists, orderly columns of names, attributes, and recommended countermeasures. A fever demon here, a house ghost there, a wind spirit that slips under doors and ruins your night. Next to the name, you might find the symptom it causes, the offering it prefers, the ritual words that can push it back out of your reality. It's a phone book for the invisible, except every entry is a problem and every number you dial is a spell. Think about that for a second. Terror, but formatted. We're going to stay with that for a moment, because it spreads. Later, in the Islamic world, you see grimoires and learned treatises that map out jinn and shayatin with the same calm precision. Ranks, regions, planetary associations, the exact nights when their power peaks. Medieval Europe does its own version with fallen angels and hellish nobility, giving you dukes of temptation, counts of plague, marquises of bad decisions. Hell starts to look less like a chaotic pit and more like a kingdom with departments, seals, and official sigils, as if the underworld has a filing system and a very patient clerk. Here is where it gets paradoxical. The more you catalogue the nightmare, the less infinite it feels. If a demon has a name, a job description, and a limited domain, then in theory it has limits. It is not everything. It is not everywhere. It is just responsible for migraines, or miscarriages, or that particular nightmare where you can't move and something sits on your chest. And once it has a file, you can imagine negotiating with it, bribing it, or if you know the right divine names, firing it from your existence. And the problems these spirits manage are almost boringly practical. A ruined harvest, a sick child, a sudden, senseless accident on a road you've walked 100 times. Demons become a way to give bad luck a face and a schedule, to say, this wasn't meaningless, it was a hostile agency following rules you just don't know yet. In that specifically Adventure Time way, the universe feels less random once you imagine a cosmic help desk, even if the help desk is malicious. Then comes the quiet pattern interrupt. If you can catalogue a demon like an insect, how cosmic is its evil? Really? Maybe these hierarchies are less about ultimate darkness and more about our need to label every hurt, to turn raw fear into a taxonomy. And from there, the next step is almost inevitable. Once you have a labeled enemy, you can write manuals, rituals, and entire forbidden books about how to talk to it. Night visitors, Lilith and the spirits that sit on your chest. Once you have a manual for speaking to demons, the next question is obvious. What happens when the demon doesn't stay in the circle? It just sits on your chest at 3 a.m. The taxonomy walks off the clay tablet and into your bedroom. The cosmic phone book becomes a very local call. Let's start with a name that has drifted through the multiverse of myths for millennia. Lilith. In the older strata, in Mesopotamia, you get Lilitu and related spirits, wind-born night beings blamed for disease, infertility, and those strange moments when the boundary between waking and dreaming thins. Later, in Jewish legend, that cloud condenses into a single figure, Lilith, the dangerous woman of the night, leaving Eden, refusing to submit, and wandering the dark edges of existence where sleepers are most vulnerable. Think about that for a second. A cosmic marital dispute becomes the explanation for why the dark corner of your room feels occupied. Here is the thing. Night demons are basically a shared human patch note for the same glitch in consciousness. Different cultures, same core motifs. They steal breath. They press on your ribs. They slip into erotic dreams and then take the blame for desire you're not ready to own. They hover near cribs, turning the raw statistical horror of infant mortality into the visit of a single nameable predator. The image repeats across the timeline, a weight on the chest, eyes wide open, body frozen, a presence that is not supposed to be there. If you've read modern accounts of sleep paralysis, the overlap is almost embarrassingly neat. We're going to treat these stories not as evidence of literal monsters, but as very efficient emotional technology. You are afraid of the dark, of your own sexuality, of losing a child, of being alone when the universe turns the lights off. Those are huge, formless fears, so you compress them into one visitor, one demon, one Lilith. Suddenly, there are rules. You can hang an amulet with her name scratched backwards. You can whisper a prayer. You can place a protective inscription over a cradle like a tiny force field against cosmic chaos. The fear doesn't vanish, but it has a shape, and reality with shapes is easier to sleep in. And then something quietly radical happens over time. The same Lilith who haunted the edges of the night gets reread as a symbol of autonomy and refusal, especially in modern interpretations. The demon of disobedient femininity becomes an icon for people who see in her not evil, but a refusal to accept rigged rules. She is not safe. She is not simple. She is a reminder that even so-called ancient evils can be reclaimed, reframed, folded back into human desire for power over their own existence. So if you have ever woken up with your body locked, lungs shallow, absolutely sure that someone is sitting on your chest, you are sharing a timeline with thousands of years of sleepers who met that same pressure and gave it a name. The weight is real. The visitor is a story. Somewhere between those two realities is the strange center of time where fear becomes myth and myth becomes a bedtime tale. And if the night visitor can be downgraded from cosmic threat to narrative companion, what else in this gallery of ancient evils is waiting to be quietly defanged in the dark? Names you're not supposed to say. The power and peril of naming. So let's stay in that gallery for a moment and dim the lights one notch further, because there is a special display case in the Museum of Ancient Evils. The names you are not supposed to say, not the claws, not the fangs, not the apocalypses, just syllables. Just vibrations in the air that somehow carry the weight of a whole cosmic threat. Here is the thing about names, especially in very old worlds that felt thinner and more permeable than ours. A name was never just a label, it was a handle on your existence. To know someone's true name was to have a grip on their reality, a direct line into their timeline, like you had found the username and password for their soul. Think about that for a second. If language can call you across a room, why couldn't the right word, spoken the right way, call you across the multiverse? The Egyptians took this to an almost bureaucratic level of seriousness. Your name was a component of your being, as real as your heart or your shadow. Carved into temple walls, repeated in tombs, tucked into the architecture of time. To preserve the name was to give the person's afterlife a renewable energy source. As long as someone, somewhere could read it aloud, you were still on the cosmic grid. Erasing it, on the other hand, was not just petty vandalism. It was spiritual execution. When pharaohs had enemies' cartouches chiseled off monuments, they were attacking their continued existence, trying to delete them from the universe's memory. That same logic quietly mutates into something darker when you move from human names to the names of the enemy, the adversary, the accuser, he who must not be named. Every culture builds these euphemisms, these linguistic sideways glances. Because if a true name is a handle, then speaking it is like grabbing the hotline to a presence you would rather not have on the other end. Saying the name is pinging the entity. Avoiding it is hanging up before it has a chance to answer. Psychologically, the power is very real even if the demon is not. To say a feared name out loud is to collapse a vague dread into a specific shape. It becomes less of a fog and more of a silhouette at the end of the bed. That can be clarifying, but it can also feel like inviting it closer. Refusing the name, using only titles and hints, becomes a tiny wish for control in a universe where the rules are mostly not yours. So in this video, we're going to do something gently rebellious and also very boring. We will say some of these names the way a curator reads the label under a cracked tablet, calm, analytical, almost sleepy, not as summons, as artifacts, old passwords for accounts that have been closed for a very long time. And once you can look straight at the names without flinching, the next step is obvious. You start reading the manuals, the curses, the grimoires, the detailed user guides for handling ancient evil like it was just another household technology of the soul. Cursed ink, tablets, grimoires, and dangerous pages. So now you're not just hearing the names, you're holding the instructions. Thin rectangles of lead, cold and soft, scratched with tiny letters that look like an argument with reality itself. These are curse tablets, little contracts in metal or clay where somebody, 2,000 years ago, decided to file a complaint with the universe and asked the underworld to handle customer support. Let's start with the physical ritual, because it matters. A curse tablet is usually folded, pierced with a nail, then hidden in a place that sits between categories, dropped into a well, slid into a crack in a temple wall, buried in a grave. Not quite in the world of the living, not quite out of it. Liminal spaces as post offices. You write the enemy's name, what you want done to them, sometimes a list of demons, as if you're tagging the right accounts, and you send it down. The wish is simple. The metaphysics are not. Here is the thing. That little sheet of lead is already a primitive user interface. You have a target, you have a desired outcome, you have a delivery channel through time and soil. Early grimoires just scale this up. Instead of one angry note, you get whole books that mix recipes, prayers, and curses, treating magic like a household technology you can operate if you memorize the right sequence of gestures and words. Boil this herb, draw this symbol, say this name. In theory, you can heal, protect, attract love, or if you're having a particularly dramatic week, annihilate your neighbor's crops. Think about that for a second. Once you imagine the universe as a system with hidden commands, it becomes very easy to believe that writing those commands down is dangerous. Early demon lists in Mesopotamia read almost like a cosmic phone book, but there's a quiet terror under the cataloging. If every spirit has a name and a protocol, then anyone who owns the manual has power, or thinks they do. So entire cultures begin to talk about forbidden knowledge, books you are not supposed to open, names you are not supposed to say. Some grimoires in later traditions were whispered about more than they were actually read, as if the ink itself might be contagious. The fear isn't only that the spells work, the fear is that close proximity to the instructions bends your desire, that you start wanting the kind of power the pages promise. And that's the irony. Texts meant to control evil, to bind demons, to ward off chaos, end up being treated as if they themselves are a kind of demon. The manual becomes haunted, the rules become radioactive, as if writing down how to talk to the multiverse leaves a residue, and the paper remembers. You still feel a faint version of this. You avoid certain topics at night, you hesitate before reading about possession, or cosmic horror, or the end of time, as if the ideas might leak out of the screen and pace quietly around your bed. In that specifically Adventure Time way, The anxiety isn't really about monsters. It's about what your own mind might do with new possibilities. And once you've written the rules down, the next step is obvious. Someone is going to try them. Not just on paper, but on bodies, on cities, on the architecture of existence itself. Forbidden words and broken seals. When speaking becomes summoning, so of course, once someone writes the rules down, someone else is going to read them out loud. You can almost see the scene. A quiet room, a single lamp, a sealed tablet or a cracked leather book that really should have stayed buried. The curious reader clears their throat, shapes a name that was meant to stay in the dark, and reality tilts a few degrees to the left. Let's start with that image, because it repeats across cultures, like a ritual déjà vu. In Mesopotamia, there are clay tablets listing demons the way you'd list contacts in a cosmic phone book, each with a name that is less a label and more a handle on a presence. In some late Egyptian spells, to read the secret name of a god aloud is to tug on their power directly, like yanking a live wire out of the wall. In medieval grimoires, the script is the same. You trace the sigil, you pronounce the syllables, and something crosses a boundary, from the underworld into the room, from imagination into appearance, from fear into manifested company. Here is the thing. This only makes sense inside a universe that is already spoken. If creation itself is imagined as divine speech, as a god saying, "Let there be," and reality obediently unfolding, then language is not decoration. Language is infrastructure to imitate that founding voice. Even badly is to tap on the load-bearing beams of existence. Mispronounce the sacred syllables, and you do not just make a mistake, you risk letting the old chaos seep back through the cracks you just made. Think about that for a second. In that logic, you are not a spectator using neutral words. You are a minor co-author in the multiverse, with every syllable as a tiny wish that the universe takes more seriously than you do. To curse is to act. To bless is to shield. To name is to invite. Saying becomes doing, and doing has consequences that ripple out across the timeline, like shockwaves from a pebble dropped into the center of time. Because people are not stupid, most traditions immediately invent counterspells to their own spells. Dangerous names get paired with protective ones, like opening a window and then instantly closing the door. You mention a feared entity and then rush to invoke a god, an angel, a saint, a protective ancestor, as if to say, yes, we knocked, but we also brought a bouncer. A demon's name might be followed by, may he be bound, or a whispered blessing, or the sign of the cross traced invisibly in the air. The ritual is a negotiation. One hand invites, the other hand locks the latch. And in this video, we're going to stay one layer above all of that. Our words are descriptive, not operative. We are not in a ritual space. We are in a narrative one, just watching how humans imagined language as high-voltage power. We can say Tiamat, or Jörmungandr, or the long tangled titles of medieval tempters, and nothing answers because we are not following the rules that would make those words into keys. We're going to keep it that way. No circles of salt, no midnight oaths, just stories about stories, like examining old matches under bright, safe light, without ever striking them. But if language alone can feel this dangerous, what happens when ancient evils are no longer just spoken, but fed, given offerings, loyalty, entire cities arranged around their hunger, guardians of the threshold, monsters at the world's edges? So imagine you follow those offerings all the way out, past the last house, past the last torch, until the road just stops. The air gets colder, the ground feels thinner, and standing right there, at the edge between your reality and whatever comes next, is someone who does not want you to cross. Let's start with the classics. Cerberus, the three-headed dog at the gates of Hades, each head watching a different direction like a living security system. Charon, the ferryman on the Styx, quietly enforcing the rule that only the properly prepared, properly paid dead get across, and all those hybrid gate beings, lion bodies with human faces in Mesopotamia, jackal-headed Anubis weighing hearts in Egypt, winged bulls and sphinxes frozen in stone but aimed directly at the threshold. They are not wandering predators. They are stationed, posted like cosmic bouncers at the door between timelines. Here is the thing. From the outside, they read as pure evil. Teeth, claws, coins for the dead. The whole aesthetic of turn back now. But from the inside, from the city of the dead, from the temple, from the royal tomb, they are law. They are the power that says, no intruders, no escapees. No one cuts the line between worlds. Think about that for a second. The same monster that terrifies you as a traveler is a comforting lock for whoever is already on the other side. Ancient maps understood this intuitively when the ink ran out on what sailors had actually seen. The margins filled with sea serpents twisting like living question marks, giants striding along unfinished coastlines, demons clinging to the edges of the parchment as if the multiverse itself frayed there. Here be dragons is not just a warning, it's cartography admitting very politely that beyond this point, the universe has not been beta tested. Monsters are the user interface of unknown space. And in this video of human existence, we're going to notice that the geography is psychological too. Birth, puberty, marriage, death, each one a bridge where the old rules wobble and the new ones haven't loaded yet. So cultures imagine guardians, midwife spirits who negotiate your first breath, trickster figures who patrol adolescence, fierce ancestor shades who stand at the doorway of the grave. They are terrifying, yes, but they are also administrators of the crossing, like cosmic customs agents stamping your passport between realities. In that specifically Adventure Time way, you can think of them less like final bosses and more like very strict, slightly scary bouncers for the universe. They check your name, they weigh your heart, they ask whether you paid the ferryman, followed the ritual, obeyed the rules. They are not evil, they are not even indifferent. They are just bound to guard the edge, where one form of existence ends and another begins. And once you accept that every border has its keeper, the question quietly shifts. If that's who waits at the door, then who or what sits deeper in the house? Underworlds as mirrors, hells, shadowlands, and quiet realms below deeper in the house. The lights don't blaze, they dim. They go low and grainy, like an old VHS tape left too close to a magnet. You expect a furnace, you get a basement. And here is the thing, in a lot of the oldest timelines we have, the underworld isn't a cosmic torture device. It's just the part of existence where everything runs at half brightness. Let's start in Mesopotamia. Their land of the dead is not a lake of fire, it's a dust bowl under a stone ceiling. The dead shuffle through streets of packed ash, eating clay, drinking water so murky it barely remembers being water. No one is being flayed. There are no inventive demonic punishments. There is only this grey, repetitive reality, where even desire has run out of energy. Ereshkigal rules there, not as a cackling villain, but as a queen managing an eternal bureaucracy of ghosts. She is stern. She is tired. She is not particularly interested in your moral alignment. Then the camera cuts, and we're in Greek Hades. Same basic architecture. Below, shadowy, away from the center of time where the living bustle around. But now the realm is stratified. You have the Asphodel Meadows for ordinary souls who did nothing especially heroic or monstrous, just existed. You have Elysium for the rare few whose lives line up with heroic ideals, and you have Tartarus, the deep, deep pit, where the punished are locked into those looping poetic torments everybody remembers. One universe, one underworld, three very different neighborhoods. Think about that for a second. Even here, the hell part is just one region in a much larger, mostly neutral after reality. Hades himself is the same way. Not a cosmic sadist, not a Satan prototype, just a god whose job is to enforce the rules of death, to keep the timelines of the living and the dead from bleeding into each other. He is not evil, he is not even indifferent. He is just bound to a domain nobody really wants to visit. Early Jewish Sheol pushes this even further. Sheol is a pit, a shadow land, a quiet collective grave where everyone goes. Righteous, wicked, kings, servants, it doesn't matter. The universe makes no afterlife distinction yet. No flames, no choirs, just silence and dim awareness, a holding pattern under the earth before later theology starts to differentiate destinations. It is melancholy, not malevolent. And once you line these places up side by side, Mesopotamian dust, Greek meadows, Israelite shadow, you start to see a pattern. Many of the rulers below, from Ereshkigal to Hades, are custodians more than tormentors, cosmic civil servants making sure the dead stay where the dead are supposed to stay. The power they wield is boundary power, not torture power. Which means the idea of a purely punitive, eternally screaming hell is only one branch in the multiverse of human imagination about what waits below. For a long time, the underworld is simply the quiet continuation of existence under different rules, a muted reflection rather than an infernal courtroom. And if the basement of the universe is this restrained, this strangely administrative, then where do the truly ancient evils live? The ones that don't just manage death, but try to unmake reality itself. When the dead won't stay put, restless spirits and hungry ghosts. So if the basement of the universe is just filing cabinets for souls and a few bored gatekeepers, here is the thing. Most people in history did not lose sleep over cosmic dragons or multiverse devouring shadows. They were worried about Uncle So-and-so, specifically about Uncle So-and-so getting up again after the funeral and coming home. That is the ancient evil you can hear in the next room. Let's start with that very local horror. In a lot of cultures, the most dangerous presence in the night isn't a demon from a distant hell. It's a restless ancestor, an unburied corpse, a wronged neighbor. You don't need a chaos serpent at the center of time if the person you failed to bury correctly is standing at the edge of your bed. The evil is domestic. It knows your name, your debts, the exact promise you made and never kept. Think about that for a second. In East Asia, this becomes almost painfully literal with hungry ghosts. These are spirits with huge bellies and impossibly narrow throats, condemned to permanent starvation. They haunt crossroads, garbage heaps, the edges of festivals always close to food and never able to really consume it. Simple declarative. They are hungry. Vivid metaphor. They are what unresolved desire looks like when it has to put on a body. Their reality is built out of neglected rites and forgotten ancestors. A universe where the wish for one more offering, one more bowl of rice, can never quite be fulfilled. We're going to notice the pattern here. The hungry ghost is not just evil. It is an indictment of children who don't perform memorial rituals, of communities that let the dead fade into bureaucratic afterthought. The rules of the haunting are social rules first. If you feed your dead, they bless you. If you ignore them, they lean on you from the other side of existence until you remember. Europe has its own version in The Revenant, not the elegant cinematic vampire, but the swollen corpse that drags itself out of a half-finished grave, smashing on doors, sitting on chests, suffocating sleepers. It is not evil. It is not even indifferent. It is just bound by rules older than you itself: improper burial, unpaid debts, unresolved feuds. The monster and the mistreated family member are the same body walking the same muddy road back to the village. Here, the moral dimension is impossible to ignore. These spirits don't show up because the universe randomly generates a jump scare. They appear when funerals are botched, inheritances cheated, vows broken. Evil becomes a symptom, an alarm system wired directly into guilt and obligation. The timeline of the haunting is the timeline of your failures coming home. Pattern interrupt. What if all those ghost stories are just extremely dramatic to-do lists? A face at the window that really means call your mother. A shape in the hallway that really means apologize. The scariest ghosts are often just your own unfinished feelings wearing a sheet, pacing the house of your mind until you finally turn on the light. And once you see that, the boundary between ancient evil and ordinary grief gets thin and very quiet, and we can follow that silence towards beings that are less about family and more about the fabric of reality itself. Monsters of the mind, night terrors, incubi, and early psychology. And if the house of your mind can be haunted by unfinished feelings, the bedroom is where those ghosts get bold. You're lying there, maybe right now, on your back in the dark, and something changes. The air thickens. The universe feels like it's leaning in. You try to move. You can't. Let's start with the classic script. There is a presence in the room, not a vague unease, but a precise needle-point awareness, as if a single gaze has become a physical weight. You feel it climb onto the bed, onto your chest. The pressure is real, crushing, like the atmosphere of another planet has dropped by for a visit. You try to cry out, and your mouth will not obey. Time stretches into this horrible, elastic moment where you are awake, you are sure you are awake, and reality has decided to ignore the usual rules. Here is the thing that is almost a perfect description of sleep paralysis. The brain has flipped some of the switches for waking, but not all. The power to move is still locked away. The dream machinery is still humming. So the mind, confronted with this impossible mismatch, does what it always does when it can't explain existence. It tells a story. In the Middle Ages, that story was an incubus or a succubus, a night demon pressing down to steal breath, or seed, or sanity. In other timelines and cultures, you get witches riding your chest, or a hag squatting on your ribs, or a dead relative sitting on you because they have something to say. Think about that for a second. The physiology is the same. Paralyzed body, hyper-alert mind, vivid hallucination at the edge of sleep. But the cast list changes with the local mythology. We're going to call that a feedback loop. You wake up pinned, you see a shadow with too many teeth, you tell the village already believes in demons. So now there is a new demon with a new name added to the cosmic phone book of night visitors. Next time someone half wakes in that same village, their terrified brain reaches for the nearest available template. Of course it's that demon. Of course it's real. The myth shapes the experience. The experience reinforces the myth. And over centuries, you get an entire multiverse of night monsters orbiting one very basic glitch in the sleeping brain. Modern neuroscience just gives the phenomenon a quieter label and a nicer bedside manner. We talk about rematonia, hypnopompic hallucinations, anxiety circuits misfiring at the center of time in your skull. The demons did not vanish. They were internalized. The power moved from outside your window to inside your nervous system. But here is the gentler truth. If you have ever had a night terror, you are not cursed, and you are not alone. You are participating in a human tradition as old as language, where the brain hits a timing error and grants itself a wish illusion of danger, then believes it for a minute. It is frightening, yes. It is also finite. The paralysis ends. the presence fades, and when it does, you can reframe it as a very dramatic bedtime story your neurons told while clocking in and out of consciousness. And once we see that the worst monsters can live entirely in the gap between sleep and waking, we're ready to meet the ones that claim to live in the gaps between worlds, the cosmic evils that don't just sit on your chest, but threaten the architecture of reality itself. Evil is contagion, plagues, demons, and invisible enemies. But before we get to dragons chewing on the edges of the universe, we have to talk about something much smaller, and in a way, much scarier. Not the monster you can see, but the one that slips in through your lungs, your crops, your drinking water. The evil that doesn't roar, it just raises a fever. Let's start with the basic problem. Before germ theory, disease looked coordinated. You wake up fine. By nightfall, you're burning, shaking, delirious. A week later, half the village is coughing in unison, the fields are blighted, the goats are dying in the same month the river runs low. From the inside of that timeline, it doesn't feel random. It feels like a campaign, an attack. And if there's an attack, there must be an attacker. Here is the thing. Once you assume an attacker, the universe suddenly becomes narratable again. Mesopotamian priests catalogued demons the way you'd catalogue contacts in a cosmic phone book. There were spirits for fevers, for headaches, for that crushing chest pain that arrived in the night. Some were drawn with lion heads and bird talons, some with twisted faces and tiny weapons, like your migraine had shown up armed for war. Lamashtu stalks pregnant women and infants. Pazuzu, with his insect wings and dog jaws, spreads and wards off plague depending on which side you're on. Think about that for a second. The same demon can be both pathogen and vaccine, depending on who is doing the ritual. So people fought back with the tools they had. Words, smoke, symbols. You get incantation tablets, where the demon is named insulted, ordered to leave. You get clay figures of the diseased spirit buried under thresholds, or burned, or drowned, so the invisible enemy can be trapped in a visible body and destroyed on schedule. Offerings are placed, goats are slaughtered, water is sprinkled in careful geometric routes through a house, like you're drawing a protective circuit in real time. Medically, none of that has power over viruses. Psychologically, it has enormous power over fear, because now the fever isn't chaos, it's a negotiation. There are rules, say the right words, pay the right price, follow the right sequence, and maybe the demon backs off. We're going to see this pattern everywhere. When reality hits you with something you can't see, but can definitely feel, the human response is to draw a face on it and call it to the center of time in your imagination. Bad luck becomes a jealous neighbor. Famine becomes an offended god. Systemic injustice becomes a single corrupt villain directing the timeline from a shadowy office. And that impulse is not ancient history. You still hear people talk about battling cancer, fighting depression, waging war on a virus, as if illness were a general in a rival army, pacing in some microscopic war room. The biology is indifferent, but the story isn't. The story gives you a role besides victim. An enemy implies a countermove, a wish, a strategy, which raises a quiet question. What happens when you stop being satisfied with exercising one demon at a time and start imagining a single cosmic source behind every plague, every curse, every failure of the world to match your desire? The moment you do that, you don't just have a fever spirit anymore, you have capital E, evil. And the next ancient cultures on our list are going to build entire universes around it. Temptation as a character, devils who offer deals, so once you've invented capital E, evil, the universe does something very human with it. It gives it a briefcase, a smile, and a contract. Suddenly, the darkness doesn't just roar from the abyss, it sits down across from you at the table and asks what you want. Let's start with the archetype you already half know, even with your eyes closed. The deal with the devil. A human stands at a crossroads at midnight, or in a study that smells like ink and regret, and they trade something precious for power, knowledge, or pleasure. Faust bargains for infinite understanding and finds out the fine print includes his soul. A blues musician at the edge of the American timeline hands over his future for talent that bends reality in every note. Sometimes it isn't even a soul on the line, just integrity or the last few years of your time, quietly converted into somebody else's profit. Here is the thing. These stories are not really about the devil. They're about the part of you that wants immediate gratification with cosmic efficiency. The tempter just externalizes that desire, turns your own inner argument into a suave stranger at the crossroads. Instead of a messy internal tug of war, you get a clean dialogue. You say, "I wish I didn't have to wait." The devil says, "You don't." Think about that for a second. The contract is just your impulse, typeset, and notarized. Religions lean into this dramatization. Satan tempting Jesus in the desert is basically the ultimate negotiation scene. Turn stones into bread, leap from the temple, take all the kingdoms of the world in an instant. Shortcut after shortcut, offered like cosmic coupons. In Christian legends, demons whisper in saints' ears, offering tiny edits to the moral script. In some Islamic stories, jinn offer shortcuts to power or hidden knowledge, a wish granted outside the usual rules of patience, community, and prayer. The universe is still the same. Your experience of desire gets staged as a conversation with a very persuasive co-star. And because temptation becomes a character, the moral geometry gets sharp and bright. The devil stands over here. You stand over there? The line between good and bad choices is drawn in thick ink, and every bargain comes with a receipt. These tales are teaching tools, but also diagnostic tools. You watch someone trade their soul for one more promotion, one more lover, one more spell that bends reality. And you can track the cost of compromise step by step, timeline by timeline. But there's a softer reading humming underneath. These tempters are often strangely charming, even sympathetic. They crack jokes, they understand you, they remember your secret wish from years ago. In that specifically Adventure Time way, they feel less like pure malice and more like the embodiment of paths you didn't take, lives you might have lived. We're going to see that again and again. Ancient evils that look suspiciously like alternate versions of you standing at the center of time, asking one quiet question. Are you sure you don't want to say yes? Why we blame demons, the comfort of an external villain. So when that alternate version of you steps forward, wearing the mask of an ancient evil and asking if you want to say yes, here is the thing. It's very tempting to say, that wasn't me. It was the demon. It was the devil. It was some cosmic parasite that slipped a wish into your timeline. You stay good, they stay bad, and the universe feels neatly organized again, like a moral filing cabinet where nothing important ever gets misshelved. Let's start with the personal level. You have a terrible impulse, a flash of cruelty, a violent image, a desire that feels completely off-brand for who you think you are. Intrusive thoughts arrive like spam wishes from the multiverse, and instead of admitting, my mind can generate this, it's easier to imagine some whispering tempter at the center of time, sliding those ideas across the counter. That can be comforting. You remained fundamentally good. The demon is just trying to hack your account. But it's also morally complicated, because if it's never really you, then how do you take responsibility? Or grow? Or change your own rules? Ancient religions understood this tension and dramatized it. Zoroastrianism has a cosmic tempter in open conflict with a purifying universe. Early Christianity leans hard into Satan as the accuser, the tester, the one who offers you a wish with hidden costs. You can see the psychological move. If evil is a character, then you can argue with it. Reject it, narrate your existence as a battle rather than a messy gradient of impulses. Think about that for a second. It is easier to fight a villain than to sit quietly with your own capacity for harm. Communities do the same maneuver, just scaled up. Behaviors that threaten the social order get labeled demonic. Epilepsy, voices, non-conforming desire, inconvenient profits. Across timelines and cultures, these have been filed under possessed to keep the edges of reality from fraying. The Mesopotamians literally made demon lists, like a cosmic phone book of everything that could go wrong with you. Call it out, name it, exile it. If the problem is a spirit, the community doesn't have to ask what in its own structure created the suffering. And that is where the comfort curdles. Because once you decide evil is an external invader, you can go hunting for hosts, witches, heretics, foreigners, the sick, the strange. History keeps rerunning the same episode where imagined demons justify very real violence. Scapegoating is a brutal kind of wish. You sacrifice one person or one group and hope the universe will grant you safety in return. But underneath all of that theatre is a very human experience. Sudden urges that feel alien. Night terrors that pin you to the bed. Thoughts you would never act on, yet can't unthink. Before neurology, before psychology, of course people heard those as voices from outside, as underworld guardians brushing against the edge of consciousness. Even now, with brain scans and diagnostic manuals, that alienness can feel absolutely real. So here is a quieter alternative. Instead of imagining yourself besieged by literal demons, you can treat these impulses as part of a complex, glitchy, occasionally chaotic mind. Less dramatic, yes. Less cinematic than a Babylonian dragon or a horned tempter offering you the world. But also kinder, because if the monster is in you, then so is the power to understand it, to negotiate with it, to change it over time. And as we move deeper into these ancient evils, we're going to see what happens when a culture stops just blaming demons and starts trying to bind them, bargain with them, even befriend them, turning the external villain into something much stranger, a partner in the story of how you stay human. Eternal fire or temporary shadow. Competing visions of hell, so once you start treating monsters as potential partners, another question creeps in on quiet feet. What happens to them in the end? Not just the demon in the corner of your room, but the big one. The ultimate punishment, the final destination, the place every culture threatens you with when it really wants you to behave. Let's start with fire, because that's the image that usually owns the real estate in your brain. Endless flames, endless screaming, a cosmic furnace turned up to maximum for all time. But here is the thing, a lot of ancient timelines did not actually run that way. In Zoroastrianism, at the end of time, all creation passes through a river of molten metal. That sounds like the worst possible spa day. Yet in their universe, the righteous experience it as warm milk. The wicked feel the burn, yes, but only until the evil is burned out of them. It is purification, not a torture chamber with no exit. Buddhist narakas go in a similar direction, but with a different flavor of dread. There are hell realms of ice and hell realms of fire, places where time stretches into absurdly huge numbers, where existence is measured in eons of falling apart and reassembling. But even there, the sentence ends. When the karma is exhausted, the being leaves. No eternal contract, no infinite lease on suffering, just a very, very long layover in a bad airport of the soul. If you grew up with the idea that hell must be forever, or it doesn't count, think about that for a second. Because even in early Judaism and Christianity, the rules were not locked yet. Some strands imagined the wicked consumed like chaff, annihilated, not preserved. Others imagined a fiery Gehenna that cleanses, after which souls are restored. There is debate, there is argument, there is this almost legal negotiation over whether divine power wants an eternal prison or a final merciful deletion. And in that specifically Adventure Time way, you can feel how imagery gets turned up for effect. Vivid hells are often more rhetorical than cartographical. They are not GPS coordinates in the multiverse. They are moral surround sound. A prophet or preacher wants to move a timeline, shift a desire, change behavior now, so they describe the worst possible future in high definition. Not because they have a precise map of the center of time, but because fear is a very persuasive special effect. Yet over and over, there's a countercurrent. Zoroastrianism schedules evil for eventual extinction. Some Christian universalists dream of every soul, even the worst, eventually healed. Hindu and Buddhist cosmologies cycle beings through hells, heavens, and rebirths until ignorance burns out. Punishment is framed as a terrible chapter, not the whole book. We're going to see that for many ancient minds, even cosmic darkness is just one act in a longer play about renewal, which loops us quietly back to you lying there in the dark. If so many old stories refuse to make you bad forever, what does that say about your own private hells, the mistakes you've sentenced yourself to relive eternally? Maybe those are more like narakas, awful, intense, but temporary. Maybe the river of molten metal is already cooling around you, and if hell itself can have an exit, then the real question becomes, who holds the key? And what happens when the monsters start reaching for it too? Worlds that end in fire, ice, and silence. So when the monsters start reaching for the keys out of hell, the myths do something wild. They don't just imagine escape from punishment, they imagine the entire universe hitting a reset button. Not quietly, not politely, in fire, in ice, and in a kind of ringing, cosmic silence. Let's start with Ragnarok. You can almost feel the temperature swing as the Norse timeline shudders towards its end. First the Fimbulwinter, 3 endless winters with no summer between, a universe locked in a freezer that never defrosts. Then everything flips. Wolves swallow the sun and moon, the sky splits, and Surt, this primordial fire giant, walks out of Muspelheim with a sword that is basically a moving sunrise made of pure combustion. The seas boil, the world tree shakes, and the gods march out knowing they're going to lose. They do it anyway. Here is the thing. The final battle is not a plot twist, it's a rematch. Jörmungandr, the world serpent, rises from the ocean, vomiting poison across the sky, facing Thor one last time. In Zoroastrian visions of the end, Angra Mainyu, the destructive spirit who has been sabotaging existence from the beginning, faces a final defeat as molten metal floods the earth, burning away every lie. In biblical apocalypses, beasts crawl out of the sea, a dragon coils around the heavens, and chaos animals that feel suspiciously like older Near Eastern monsters get one more scene in the spotlight. Think about that for a second. The pattern is almost boring in how consistent it is, and yet it never gets old. Chaos shows up early as a serpent, a dragon, a beast from the deep. It gets pushed down, chained, exiled. At the end of time, it comes back. Not sneaky. Announced. The universe apparently has rules, and one of them is, you have to face your oldest fear twice. Once to build reality, once to finish the conversation. But these are not just obliteration fantasies. After Ragnarok's firestorm, a new earth rises from the sea, green and quiet, with a few surviving gods and humans walking through dew on grass that has never been stepped on. After the Zoroastrian river of metal, the world is purified, bodies resurrected, even hell emptied, and existence goes on in a restored, incorruptible state. Biblical imagery ends with a new heaven and new earth, a cleansed city descending like an answered wish. Destruction is framed as prelude, not punchline. Emotionally, apocalypses are justice daydreams painted on a cosmic screen. They say, the cruelty you see is not permanent. The current power structures do not have tenure. The timeline itself is on your side eventually. They let people imagine an expiration date for empires, for oppressors, for the specific dragons sitting on their chests. And we're going to zoom that down to you, quietly. Your world ends in smaller ways. A relationship breaking, a job disappearing, a belief system melting like ice in unexpected heat. It feels like Fimbulwinter or like walking through molten metal. It feels final. But in that specifically Adventure Time way, myths keep insisting that after the last battle, there is a morning where you step onto new ground. The monsters return, they are faced, the world ends. And then, inconveniently, you still wake up the next day in a slightly different universe. So the real question is not whether the world ends, but what survives the fire with you, and what quiet ancient evils insist on coming back for one more round. Ages of gold, silver, and iron. Decline, corruption, and the longing for before so. If the monsters keep coming back for one more round, ancient people do something very human and very cosmic at the same time. They zoom out and blame time itself. Let's start with the Greeks, because they turn nostalgia into architecture. In Hesiod's telling, there isn't just one world, there are ages stacked like sediment. First, the Golden Age. Humans live like minor gods, no work, no war, no death as we know it. Reality is soft, benevolent, and the universe feels close, like the gods are just in the next room making tea. Then the Silver Age. People grow up slow, disobedient, further from Olympus, and Zeus wipes them out. Bronze follows, hard and warlike, all weapons and no wisdom, like the timeline itself has picked up a sword and forgotten why. Then, weirdly, a heroic age, a brief upgrade where you get Achilles and Heracles and all the epic drama. A patch, not a fix. And finally, the Iron Age, us. This is the age of toil and injustice, where the gods are distant, the rules feel rigged, and evil is not a singular villain but a gradual thickening of the air. Here is the thing. In that model, every cruelty you see is not random. It is proof that you live late in the cycle, when the metal has rusted. Hindu cosmology scales that same mood up to the multiverse. Instead of metals, you get yugas, 4 vast ages rotating around the center of time. Satya Yuga is like a cosmic golden age. Truth is stable, Dharma stands on all 4 legs, and existence feels aligned. Then Treta and Dvapara Yuga, each losing a quarter of that virtue, as if someone keeps turning down the brightness on the universe. Finally, Kali Yuga, the age many traditions say we're in now. Corruption, chaos, spiritual laziness, violence that feels baked into the timeline itself. Think about that for a second. The sense that people are worse now is not just your grandparents' complaint. It is written as a law of time. We're going to notice something delicate here. These frameworks take your private nostalgia, your wish that things were like before, and externalize it. The ache becomes cosmology. If the present feels cruel, that's not your anxiety, that's the Iron Age doing its job. If leaders are corrupt and reality feels off, of course it is. This is Kali Yuga. The universe, allegedly, has told you what to expect. But built into both systems is a quiet, stubborn hope. Time is not a straight line into oblivion. It is a wheel. After iron, something golden. After Kali, renewal. Evil is framed as symptom and signal. Yes, The age is decaying, but decay is the precondition for the reset. The apocalypse is not the end of existence, it is maintenance. So are we uniquely doomed, or just another generation convinced the bar is lower than ever? In this video, we keep circling that question because the next layer of myth does something even stranger with decline. It stops blaming time and starts blaming names. Chaos as fertile soil, when the monster is also the mother. So if the last layer of myth started blaming names, here is the thing. Before the names, there was just the ocean, not the cute beach vacation ocean. The cosmic, black-green, no up, no down ocean that swallows sky and shore and memory. In Mesopotamia, that ocean has a name. Tiamat. She is chaos, yes, but she is also mother. The gods don't just kill her, they build the world out of her body. Let's start there, because it quietly rewires the whole ancient evil story. Marduk slices Tiamat in half, stretches one half into the sky, presses the other into the earth, pins her with mountains, lets her rivers leak out as the Tigris and Euphrates. The feared dragon is literally the architecture of reality. You walk on her. You drink her. You breathe under her inverted ribs. Think about that for a second. In this universe, order isn't the opposite of chaos. It's taxidermied chaos, mounted and repurposed. And she's not alone in that role. The Norse world serpent coils around Midgard, poison in its fangs, but also holding the circle of existence together until Ragnarok. Egyptian Nun is the dark water before creation, terrifying in its formlessness, yet also the reservoir from which every sunrise is poured. The monster at the beginning of time doubles as the compost heap, rotting, but feeding everything. Once you see that pattern, fertility gods stop looking soft and start looking dangerous. Storm gods like Baal or Zeus bring the rain that keeps crops alive and the lightning that erases villages in one night. Earth goddesses cradle seeds and babies and also open as graves. The same ground that grows wheat will take your body back without hesitation. She is not evil. She is not even indifferent. She is just bound by rules older than you itself. We're going to lean on that for a moment because it's doing something quietly psychological. These myths keep telling you that the forces that threaten to drown you, desire, nature, change, are the same forces that make growth and creativity possible. Your longing can wreck a timeline. Your longing can also write a poem, start a family, invent a bridge. Same current, different banks. Calling those currents evil is one way to feel safer. If chaos is only a dragon, you can fantasize about a hero with a sword. But when you only name the destructive side, you start to fear your own vitality. You start to treat your grief, your appetite, your wild ideas as little Tiamats that must be chained in the basement of the psyche, instead of the raw material for new realities. Here is the pattern interrupt. What if some of the monsters in your life are just energies without infrastructure, anger without a ritual, grief without a language, a river before levees flooding because nobody has taught it where to go? Ancient people eventually learned to terrace hillsides and build canals. Suddenly the same floodplain that used to erase villages becomes the breadbasket of an empire. In that specifically Adventure Time way, the myths are whispering a design note about existence. You don't get to delete chaos, you only get to negotiate with it. You redirect, you channel, you make treaties with dragons. And the next move in the story is exactly that. When the fear of raw power shifts from oceans and storms to something even more intimate, the names and words living inside your own mouth. Evil as mirror, what our monsters say about us. So when the fear of raw power moves from oceans and storms into the names and words living inside your own mouth, something else quietly shifts with it. The monster stops being out there and starts being a mirror. Here is the thing. Once you've met enough ancient evils, you realize you're mostly looking at human concerns wearing elaborate, scaly costumes. Let's start with the Chaos Dragons and World Serpents, the Tiamats and Jormungandries. On the surface, they're cosmic reptiles trying to eat the universe. Underneath, their anxiety about floods, storms, and the terrifying fact that the sea does not care about your village's 5-year plan. In harsh deserts, in floodplains, in earthquake zones, the spirits of nature get teeth. Rivers want blood. Winds hold grudges. Reality itself feels like an unstable wish, so the gods fight dragons to make the world feel architected instead of accidental. Then you get tempters and devils and whispering voices in the dark. Cultures with strict moral codes, with elaborate purity rules and social hierarchies, lean hard into that. Satan, Ahriman, the demon who takes notes on every missed prayer. They all externalize the pressure of obedience. You're not just breaking a rule, you're feeding an enemy. Think about that for a second. The harsher the social expectations, the more detailed the cosmic HR department of sin becomes. Night demons and underworld guardians live closer to the bed. Their sleep paralysis, grief, and the fear that death is a locked door with a very picky bouncer. Disease spirits and plague demons show up where medicine is uncertain and contagion feels like invisible malice. A cough isn't just a cough. It's a hostile presence. And apocalyptic beasts, the multi-headed monsters at the end of the timeline, are what happens when a civilization looks at political collapse or climate chaos and says, okay, that's not just bad governance, that's literally the end of the age. We're going to stay with that mirror for a moment, because it reflects something uglier too. Marginalized groups get turned into monsters. Foreigners become cannibal tribes beyond the mountains. Independent women become child-stealing night fiends. Queer desire gets wrapped in scales and wings. The myth says, beware the demon, but the subtext says, beware the neighbor who doesn't follow the rules. The multiverse of evil doubles as a social panic chart, but values drift. Timelines fork, and when they do, the monsters molt. Lilith moves from baby-killing demon to symbol of female autonomy and sexual self-determination. Tricksters who once threatened order, Loki, Coyote, Anansi, slide in that specifically Adventure Time way toward beloved chaos gremlins who expose hypocrisy and make existence less rigid. Evil is not a fixed category, it's a mood board. So as you lie there, at your own private center of time, imagine a monster built from your biggest fear. Not abstractly, give it a shape. The unpaid bill with too many eyes, the failure with smoke for hands, the loneliness that rattles like chains. Let it loom at the side of your bed for one breath, and then watch what happens when it remembers it's tired. It yawns. Its claws click against the floor as it curls up, like an overworked guard dog who misunderstood the assignment. The universe does not erase it, it just lets it sleep. And in the quiet that follows, you can feel the next move in the story forming. Not to kill your monsters, but to ask what they were trying to tell you before they nodded off. Rule book of the dark, unwritten laws of ancient evil. So when the monster finally curls up at the edge of reality and goes to sleep, you're left with a weird question. If even the ancient evils can get tired, what are they tired of? Here is the thing. Once you start looking closely, you realize they're exhausted from following rules. Let's start with the obvious. Bedtime-friendly pattern. Over and over, across timelines and cultures, the dark doesn't just kick your door down. It waits. Vampires must be invited across a threshold. Demons in grimoires demand that you say their exact name in the right order, with the right incense. Even the Babylonian chaos dragon Tiamat needs a ritual challenge before the universe can be rearranged into an orderly world. The horror is cosmic, but the etiquette is weirdly formal. Doors matter, circles matter, names matter. A chalk ring on the floor can hold a demon that has watched stars explode. A mezuzah on a doorway, an amulet on a baby, a whispered prayer at midnight. These are tiny boundary markers in the multiverse, and the rulebook of the dark, whatever it is, tends to respect them. Not out of kindness, out of contract. And that contract is secretly the lullaby. Because if the evil has rules, then you have strategies. If the demon must be invited, you can refuse. If the curse needs your name, you can hide it. Or in ancient Egypt, you can chisel someone else's off the wall and erase their existence from the cosmic ledger. In this video of human history, we're going to keep seeing the same quiet maneuver. People invent prayers, taboos, and little household technologies of power, amulets, wards, forbidden names, as if they're patching reality with duct tape and hope. These beings are not pure chaos. They are more like terrifying bureaucrats at the center of time. Think about that for a second. Satan in Job can't touch a hair on anyone's head without some higher permission. Zoroastrian demons operate on a schedule, with an expiration date stamped on cosmic evil itself. The jinn in old stories negotiate like lawyers, bound by oaths, oddly precise about who owns which soul and under what conditions. They twist the rules. They do not escape them. Of course, there are edge cases, trickster figures who seem to break the pattern, demons who appear in dreams uninvited, monsters who cross thresholds unasked. But when you zoom out across the timeline, even those exceptions start to look like another rule. They show up to teach a lesson, restore balance, or expose a hidden desire you were pretending not to have. The rule is that they seem ruleless. We're going to say something slightly uncomfortable now. These laws of ancient evil might not be about the monsters at all. They're about us. Humans want a universe where even the worst possibilities are legible, where every shadow in the multiverse has a user manual, if you can just find the right forbidden page. So we imagine that no matter how dark the power, it still has a clause, a loophole, a ritual off switch. And if there are rules, maybe there are penalties, cosmic fines, interest on unpaid fear. The next part of the story is what happens when someone breaks the contract. Why we keep the dark around, uses of evil in story and ritual, because once you have penalties, you have a use for the dark. Here is the thing. Ancient evils are not just background radiation in the universe, they're social technology. When a Mesopotamian tablet describes demons that chew on oath breakers, that is not only a horror image, that is a public service announcement. You don't need guards watching every deal if people believe the contract is wired directly into the center of time, with a hungry spirit as the late fee department. The story does the surveillance for you. Let's start with that. Tales of demons who punish liars, adulterers, or those who swear falsely on the gods become a kind of invisible legal system. In early Zoroastrianism, breaking truth aligned you with the lie, a cosmic principle with its own army. In early Christianity, the Satan who tempts you is also the accuser who prosecutes you. One reality, two roles. The myth says, if you warp the moral timeline, something will warp you back. No paperwork required, just fear, repetition, and a very vivid imagination. But we're going to go deeper, because these evils are also mirrors for desire. If you can't safely talk about wanting your neighbor's spouse or revenge on your brother, you can talk about the demon that whispers those wishes into your ear at night. Think about that for a second. The desire is yours, but the narrative outsources it to a tempter, a succubus, a wandering jinn. You get to walk around your own forbidden impulses at a distance, like pacing the edge of a cosmic crater, without admitting that the gravity is coming from inside you. This is why forbidden texts feel so electric. A grimoire that catalogues spirits like a cosmic phone book lets you fantasize about power you're not supposed to have, but safely shelved under the label dangerous. You read the name you're not supposed to say out loud. You do not say it. You feel the wish anyway. Then there's the catharsis circuit. Rituals of exorcism, confession, or communal storytelling take guilt, fear, and anger and pin them to something with horns. You speak, the priest chants, the crowd watches, and suddenly your private dread has coordinates in the multiverse. It is a shadow to be driven out. The demon leaves, or pretends to. You walk away lighter, even if nothing in the material world has changed. And once a year, many cultures do something even stranger. They let the dark win on purpose. Carnival, Saturnalia, misrule days where servants mock masters, masked figures roam the streets, and chaos is briefly promoted to CEO of reality. For one night, the rules invert. The evil clown becomes king, and the universe practices falling apart in a controlled burn. Then, at dawn, order returns. The masks come off. The pressure gauge on the social boiler drops just enough that it doesn't explode. You still do this. Horror movies, true crime marathons, bedtime monster stories whispered in the dark. These are rituals with popcorn instead of incense. You visit the abyss in 90-minute segments. With a pause button, you feel your heart race, then you step back into the light of your phone screen and check the time. The monster never really leaves the room, it just goes back under the bed, on schedule. And ancient stories understood that schedule. They knew you had to let the dark speak sometimes, or it would find its own microphone. The next part of the story is what happens when the microphone gets too loud, when the festival doesn't end on time, and the evil you were using as a tool starts using you back. Lonely devils. The existential sadness of ancient evils. And here is the thing. When the microphone doesn't get turned off, when the festival of fear just keeps looping, the monsters don't only wear you down, they wear themselves down too. The ancient evils we keep summoning on repeat are not just weapons pointed at us. They're characters trapped in roles, exiles wandering the back rooms of the universe. Let's start with that exile. Over and over, in different timelines, the story says, they were thrown out. Satan is a fallen angel cast from heaven, separated from the light he used to reflect. In Zoroastrianism, Amgra Mainyu opposes a cosmos that will eventually be purified without him. Demons in Mesopotamian tablets are banished to deserts, crossroads, ruined houses, as if the worst punishment is not fire, but distance. Not annihilation, isolation. They don't live at the center of time, they live in its forgotten margins. Think about that for a second. So many of these beings are defined by separation as much as by malice. Yermungand, the world serpent, is thrown into the sea, wrapped around reality, but never quite part of it. Tiamat, chaos dragon of Babylon, is sliced in half and turned into the architecture of existence, which means the world is literally built from a defeated body that never got to leave the battlefield. Even when they win, they lose. Even when they devour, they're hungry. And then there's the repetition. The tempter appears, offers the deal, twists the wish. Again, and again, and again. Satan in the desert, Mara under the Bodhi tree, the wandering devils of later grimoires who show up when you light the right candle and say the right name. They are not improvising. They are running a script. Cosmic customer service for desire. You ask, they respond. The same lines, the same clauses, the same fine print pressed onto another fragile human timeline. There is boredom there. Regret. In some stories, demons pause. They complain about the work. The Islamic Iblis, refusing to bow, spends the rest of time convincing humans to repeat his mistake, which is also his confession. Medieval European devils grumble in miracle plays about how exhausting it is that every soul keeps repenting at the last minute. Being the villain in everyone's story becomes its own punishment. You are remembered, but never understood. Here is the pattern interrupt. What if they're lonely because they're ours? If these ancient evils are projections of fear, then their exile is just a cosmic scale version of what you do to your own thoughts. The impulses you push down, the anger you banish, the grief you don't name. You turn them into monsters in the wilderness of your mind, and then you're surprised when the wilderness feels haunted. Their loneliness mirrors your own. So imagine this. As you drift towards sleep, the world serpent loosens its grip around the earth. The night demon who sat on the chest of 1,000 dreamers finally stands up and stretches. The tempter closes the last contract, sets the last wish on the shelf. At the end of time, when the multiverse has finished its long experiment with power and fear and desire, they are told, you can stop now. No more roles, no more rules, just rest. In that specifically Adventure Time way, the universe turns the lights down, not as a banishment, but as a bedtime. The Chaos Dragon curls into the dark. The fallen angel looks up at a sky with no accusations in it, and for the first time in their long scripted existence, the ancient evils do the one forbidden act. They sleep, and the cosmos does not need them awake. We're going to follow them there, but before we let the monsters finally lie down, we have to watch how some stories insist on waking them back up, over and over, just to see what breaks. Are monsters real if we all agree on them? So when the fallen angel finally curls up under a blank accusation-free sky, here is the thing. The story doesn't stop just because the characters are tired. You keep telling it. We keep telling it. And at some point, you have to ask a very quiet, very annoying question. If everyone agrees the monster is there, and lives like it is there, and fears like it is there, how unreal is it, actually? Let's start with the demons that never walk down a physical street, but still manage to reroute entire timelines. No horned creature signed the papers that launched witch trials. No scaled dragon personally drafted the legal codes obsessed with purity, temptation, and punishment. Yet belief in those invisible enemies shaped wars, marriages, confessions whispered in the dark. A demon does not have to stand at the center of time to exercise power. It just has to sit in the center of a culture's imagination, quietly nudging what people think is possible in this universe. Esoteric traditions take that intuition and give it a name. Thought forms, egregores, psychic constructs. You get this idea that if enough minds concentrate on one fear, one desire, one archetypal enemy, the image congeals, not into flesh maybe, but into a pattern that behaves as if it had its own agenda. Simple, declarative. People imagine a devouring chaos. Vivid metaphor. The chaos starts answering back, like an echo that has learned new lines. Think about that for a second. When a city obsesses over a curse, or a congregation obsesses over Satan, the shared attention becomes a kind of fuel. Something is being fed, even if it's only a feedback loop in the collective unconscious. And those feedback loops build architecture. Hells and devils and underworld guardians may be stories, but they are also blueprints for behavior. A child who grows up convinced that one wrong wish will doom their soul lives inside a psychological prison more secure than any cosmic dungeon. Guilt, comfort, obedience. These are real. They hurt, they heal, they steer entire lives. The underworld might be metaphor, but the insomnia it produces is not. From another angle, some ancient evils look less like external invaders and more like masks your own mind wears when it wants to terrify itself. Sleep paralysis demons, Lovecraftian shadows That presence at the edge of the bed at 3 a.m. These might be encounters with buried memories, with the collective stories your culture has been whispering into your nervous system, or with something we don't yet have the scientific vocabulary to file neatly away. Not fake, not exactly real, just unclassified. In this video, we're going to hold that ambiguity on purpose. We don't have to decide whether Tiamat, Satan, or the nameless thing in the corner is literally out there in the multiverse. We can treat them as stories, as symbols, as maybe some things that press against the edges of reality, like dreams looking for a body. And the more you relax into that uncertainty, the sleepier it becomes. Because once you admit that monsters might be psychological, cultural, or metaphysical all at once, a new question appears, just over the horizon of your drowsy attention. If belief can build an evil, what else has it already built? Quietly, while you weren't looking. Tiny demons of daily life, modern echoes of ancient fears. So let's take that question and bring it all the way home, down from cosmic dragons and apocalypses to the battlefield of your kitchen counter. Here is the thing. Belief doesn't just build world serpents and devils. It also builds the tiny demons that live in your daily routine. The one that hides your keys. The one that whispers, very helpfully, that you probably ruined that conversation 3 years ago. The one that keeps your thumb scrolling at 2 a.m. like it's powering the universe. Let's start with that image. Your anxieties as a little household pantheon. There's a demon of, did I lock the door? Who patrols the hallway, rattling the doorknob of your memory. There's a demon of, check your email again, who taps the glass of your attention like a bored goldfish. None of them are eldritch horrors at the center of time. They're just busy, overzealous. A bit dramatic. Think about that for a second, because this is exactly what older cultures did, just with more incense and fewer push notifications. In ancient Europe, people blamed lost tools and creaking floors on kobolds and brownies, those small, semi-playful spirits who might help with chores or spill the flour depending on how respected they felt. In Rome, Lares guarded the household, tiny guardians of the doorway between safety and chaos. You can almost see the continuity in the timeline. You misplace your keys, they misplaced a spindle. You blame my brain, they blamed a kobold. Different cosmology, same impulse to externalize the static in your reality into someone you can talk about, because we're going to do the same maneuver here, just quietly, while you drift. When you personify a habit or a worry, you give it a face, a name, a job description. Suddenly, you're not vaguely overwhelmed by anxiety. You're negotiating with the demon of worst-case scenarios who sits in the corner with a clipboard, furiously generating disaster fan fiction. You can say, thank you for your service, but we're off duty right now. You can set rules, curfews. No more cosmic catastrophizing after midnight. Ancient people escalated this strategy all the way to the horizon of existence. Drought became a dragon. Temptation became a devil. Grief became a ghost who refused to leave the threshold. They weren't being naive. They were being practical. It is easier to speak to a dragon than to a climate pattern. It is easier to wrestle a devil than to wrestle your own desire. The multiverse of inner experience collapses into a single negotiable figure. So here is a small, sleepy visualization. Picture your personal demons as overworked little office workers of the soul, slumped over their desks at the edge of your awareness. The key hider demon with a filing cabinet full of important objects misplaced for your own good. The doom whisperer demon with a wall of conspiracy strings connecting every possible failure in your life. The scroll gremlin monitoring infinite timelines of content, convinced that if you stop, reality might miss something crucial. Now imagine walking through that office and turning off the lights, one by one. You thank each of them for trying to keep you alive, for assuming that vigilance is the same as power. You tell them, very clearly, that tonight's wish is simple: rest. Not banishment, not exorcism, just rest. They yawn, they put down their clipboards and phones. They curl up in desk chairs like tiny dragons on hordes of half-finished worries. And as they sleep, the room of your mind gets quieter, and you can feel the next layer of ancient evils waiting in the dark beyond the doorway, bigger and older than these little household spirits, ready to be shrunk down in their turn, softening the edges. How stories tame ancient evils over time. So those little office gremlin worries fall asleep, and beyond them, in that darker hallway of your mind, the older monsters are waiting. Not the ones that hide your emails, the ones that used to swallow suns and end timelines. And here is the thing, almost all of them are already halfway to being plush toys. Let's start with the obvious example. Vampires. Once they were walking plagues, animated corpses bloated with disease, metaphors for rot and contagion and the fear that the grave did not close properly. Now they sparkle, brood on balconies, and ask you about your feelings. The wish has flipped. The desire is no longer, keep them out, but what if they loved me back? Think about that for a second. A figure that once explained why your village was dying in the night now sells perfume and teen dramas. The same drift happens with devils. Medieval sermons turned Satan into the cosmic prosecutor, a being whose voice scraped through reality like nails on the fabric of existence itself. Fast forward through time, through parody and carnival and political cartoons, and suddenly the devil is a red mascot on a hot sauce bottle, a Halloween costume with a plastic trident, a sitcom character negotiating soul contracts like bad phone plans. He is not terrifying. He is not even indifferent. He is just bound by marketing departments older than you. Grim Reapers make the same journey. Once they were the last face at the edge of existence, a walking end credits sequence. Now they show up in comedies, drop the scythe on their own foot, complain about overtime. Death becomes a character you can argue with, a cosmic civil servant at the center of time, doing their job. We're going to keep seeing that pattern. The more a monster appears, the more predictable it becomes, and the easier it is to bend the rules of its image until it stops being pure terror and starts being familiar. Pattern interrupt. Sometimes the softening is not just cute, it is defiant. Witches, once legal excuses to burn marginalized people, become symbols of resistance, queer identity, feminist power. Lilith, blamed as a child-stealing demon in some timelines of tradition, gets reclaimed as a banner for autonomy and refusal. The same name that once functioned like a curse turns into a username, a tattoo, a quiet declaration: I will be the monster you warned me about, and I will be fine. Children's stories do this as a training exercise. Friendly ghosts who just want to play. Dragons who hoard board games instead of gold. These tales take that primal unknown under the bed and give it social skills. They whisper that the universe is not only out to get you, sometimes it just wants a snack and a friend. And by listening to this, in this video of very slow, very patient ancient evils, you're participating in the same process. You are turning chaos dragons and world-ending demons into background characters in a bedtime narrative. You watch them on the screens of your own mind like Prismo at his multiverse wall, and each retelling files their teeth down a little more. In the next section, we'll walk toward the really big ones, the world serpents, the cosmic darkness before creation, and see how even they can be folded gently into something you can sleep beside. The last demon at the end of the world. So let's start from the other end of the timeline. You've walked past the world serpents and the primordial chaos, past Tiamat and Jörmungandr and all the named horrors in the ancient cosmic phone book. And you keep walking. farther than prophecy, farther than religion, until you're at the edge of a universe that has run out of reasons to be bright. The stars are mostly gone, the last galaxies are thin, like old breath on a cold window. Time itself feels tired, as if even the center of time has dimmed its screens and turned the volume down. And here is the thing. Somewhere in that almost dark, there is still one ancient evil left. Not the biggest, not the loudest. Just the last one who didn't get the memo that the story is over. You can picture it if you want. Part dragon, with the long, slow coil of a world serpent. Part shadow, not quite touching reality, edges blurring where the multiverse used to be busy. Part memory, stitched together from every whispered curse and bedtime threat your ancestors ever used to keep their children inside. After dark, it drifts through the thinning night, like an unfinished sentence. It is not raging, it is not even plotting. It is just tired. This is the monster that has carried the weight of every fear ever projected onto it. Every forbidden text, every name you weren't supposed to say out loud, every demon catalogued in some Mesopotamian tablet, all of that piled on its back like cosmic luggage. Think about that for a second. To exist only as the negative space in other people's desires, and as the universe cools, there are fewer and fewer minds left to imagine it. Fewer storytellers to invoke apocalypse, fewer children to check under the bed. The power drains away not with a battle, but with a forgetting. No hero, no final spell, just silence. One day, if you can still call it a day, someone tells the last story about evil. Maybe it's spoken. Maybe it's just a flicker of thought in a brain that is almost done with electricity. The story ends. The storyteller sleeps, and the monster feels something it has never felt before. Absence. No one is looking at it. We're going to stay with that for a moment, because without attention, even the sharpest concept goes dull. Its claws turn translucent, then to mist. Its teeth, which once chewed through worlds in myth, are now outlines, like sketches on the fogged glass of existence. Its roar contracts into a sigh that barely disturbs the thin cosmic background. Evil, as a character, needs an audience. It always has. In that specifically Adventure Time way, it's like a wish with no wisher, structurally impressive, but functionally empty. When the audience sleeps, the monster finally gets permission to do the one forbidden act in its long career. It rests. So the last demon curls up in the great dark, not to scheme, not to wait for a sequel timeline, just to fold its wings, if they are still there, and lean into the quiet as the universe itself eases into a long, slow cosmic sleep. And yet, even here at the end, there is one more twist we haven't talked about yet. Falling asleep with the ancients. What we've really been talking about, and yet even here at the end, there is one more twist we haven't talked about yet. The twist is that this was never really about the demons, not the chaos dragons, not the world serpents coiled around the roots of existence, not the devils with legal contracts or the cursed names you're not supposed to say out loud. It was about you, about us, about what a fragile, soft, breathing organism does when it wakes up in a universe that does not come with an instruction manual, but does come with storms, sickness, betrayal, and the very reliable promise that time only moves in one direction. Here is the thing. From the first primordial ocean where Tiamat thrashes, to the last apocalypse where the sky falls in slow motion, we've been talking about the same experiences, just in louder colors. A storm is terrifying, so it becomes a dragon. A plague is invisible, so it becomes a demon list, neatly catalogued like a cosmic phone book. Desire is confusing, so it becomes a tempter at the crossroads, offering you a wish in exchange for something you can't afford to lose. Think about that for a second. Every ancient evil is just weather or illness, or injustice, or grief, wearing a mask big enough that we can see it from far away. We walked through underworlds where names can be erased like the Egyptians feared, and that erasure is a second death. We followed cursed tablets and grimoires that treat magic like household technology, as if you could debug reality with the right sequence of words. We watched devils in legal robes argue over souls, and world serpents like Jormungandr wait patiently at the edge of the timeline for everything to collapse. But underneath the cosmic costumes, the plot stayed weirdly domestic. People are scared of endings, of unfairness, of their own capacity to hurt the people they love. Because there's a central tension humming under all of this, like a refrigerator in the background of the multiverse. We want order, we get chaos. We want to be good, we discover painfully that we have power to harm. We want safety, the universe, very politely, does not sign that contract. So we negotiate. We invent rules, we invent demons, we invent apocalypses that end with purification, so someone somewhere can say, it will make sense in the end. In this video of human history, evil isn't just a monster, it's a grammar for talking about limits. And once you see it that way, the entire history of ancient evils starts to look like a collective lullaby we've been singing to ourselves at the center of time. We're going to name the darkness. We're going to narrate it. We're going to exaggerate it until it becomes slightly ridiculous, in that specifically Adventure Time way where the end of the universe shares a couch with a snack. That's the dry little joke buried in the myth. If you can tell a story about the thing that terrifies you, you have already shrunk it enough to fit inside a sentence. So as you drift here, you're not just one person falling asleep to distant monsters. You're in quiet kinship with everyone who ever lay awake by a Mesopotamian river, or under a Viking sky, or next to an electric outlet glow, wondering what waits in the dark, and trying to give it a name. Different gods, different demons, same human heartbeat, same ritual. Listen to the story, hold the fear in your hands for a while, then set it down gently beside the bed. And that last twist is this: even the stories themselves get sleepy. They change, they fade, they retire. The chaos dragon becomes a metaphor. The devil becomes a character in a play. The curse becomes a joke you tell to break the tension. What happens when we finally learn to see the shadows that way? Still real, but not absolute. That's where we're going next, into the quiet space after the last monster has finished speaking. You, the dark, and the tiny monsters that love you so. Now we're in that quiet space after the last monster has finished speaking, and something strange happens. The silence is loud. The dark around you isn't empty. It's crowded with half-remembered shapes, little echoes of every chaos dragon and world serpent and whispering demon we've just walked past together. Let's start right there, with you and the dark. If any fear has woken up while we've been talking, some old embarrassment, some future disaster, some vague sense that the universe is a little too big and you are a little too breakable, don't push it away. Here is the thing. You can look at it the same way you've been looking at Tiamat, or the Lich, or that nameless cosmic darkness, not as absolute reality, as a character, as a creature walking across the timeline of your mind. We're going to give it a job description. That tightness in your chest about tomorrow? Imagine it as a tiny, over-caffeinated underworld guardian whose entire role in existence is prevent humiliation at all costs. The dread about loss might be a small archivist spirit, furiously cataloguing worst-case scenarios so nothing can surprise you. The voice that says, "Don't even try," could be a very dramatic palace guard, convinced that failure would destroy the multiverse. Think about that for a second. How exhausting it must be to be that guard. Now in your head, you can talk to them the way ancient priests talk to their spirits. Mesopotamian scribes literally kept demon lists like a cosmic phone book. They named, categorized, negotiated. Egyptians believed a name could be attacked, so they defended names with more names. You don't have to banish your fear demons to the center of time. You can acknowledge them, name them, and then quietly thank them. You're trying to protect me from embarrassment. You're preparing me for loss. You're keeping me alert. They are clumsy. They overestimate their own power, but they are, in a very strange way, on your side. This is a different kind of magic. Not the wish where everything disappears in a flash of light, but the wish where you invite the monsters in for tea. You picture that anxious archivist sitting at a little table, feet not touching the floor, sipping something warm. You tell the hallway shadow it can sit by the door instead of standing in it. You set rules. You may warn me, but you may not paralyze me. You may visit at dusk, but not at 3 a.m. And sometimes, in that specifically Adventure Time way, they shrink. Not gone, just resized to fit your actual life instead of swallowing the universe. There is fear there, concern, the exhausting loyalty of inner guardians who don't know when to clock out. If you forget all of this by morning, that's fine. You're not studying for an exam in demonology. You're letting your nervous system hear a different story about the dark. The point isn't the law. The point is that as you drift through your own private multiverse of half-dreams, you are not alone in the hallway. You have tiny monsters who love you, and you have the power to decide how close they're allowed to stand. And from here, we can go one layer deeper, to what happens when even the monsters get tired, and the only thing left awake is you, breathing in a universe that is suddenly very, very gentle. A soft descent, letting the monsters fade into background noise. So now we're here, in that very gentle universe, and here is the thing. If you check in with your own mind for a moment, the monsters probably already look a little blurry. The dragons, the demons, the underworld gates we walked through together earlier in this video. They're still there, but their edges are soft now, like dreams you only half remember from a nap you took 3 timelines ago. You might try to grab one detail, a name, a date. Tiamat's coils around the newborn cosmos, or some Mesopotamian demon catalogued like a cosmic phone book entry. And as soon as you reach, it slides away. That's not a failure of memory. That is the mind dimming the lights in the theater. We're going to let those details dissolve on purpose. Names can go, genealogies of evil can go. Even which underworld belonged to which civilization can quietly log off for the night. What's left is just the emotional residue, this calm sense that even the scariest stories can be held without flinching. The Chaos Dragon becomes a background pattern in the wallpaper of reality. Satan, Jormungandr, nameless guardians at the threshold of existence, all turn into distant traffic noise, humming somewhere beyond the walls of your room. Think about that for a second. You have taken an entire multiverse of ancient fear, and your nervous system has filed it under ambient. That is its own small, quiet power. And your room right now is its own safe underworld. The lights are lower than the surface world above you. Shadows pool in the corners like very lazy spirits who missed their alarm. The walls are stone in this metaphor, but drywall in reality, and both work. Your door is a gate. The lock is an underworld guardian who only knows one rule. You decide who enters. Outside, the universe keeps doing whatever the universe does. Inside, there is just you, gravity, and the familiar chorus of small protective sounds. Maybe it's the soft hum of a fridge, pretending to be a distant cosmic engine. Maybe it's a car passing, briefly impersonating a river in the land of the dead. Maybe it's nothing at all but your own breathing, rising and falling like a very low-stakes tide at the center of time. These are your household gods now. Ordinary, boring, quietly divine. As you lie there, your thoughts are probably starting to wander. They might mix these myths with personal memories. An argument from 3 years ago, a childhood nightmare, a random image of Tiamat standing in line at a grocery store. They might pull in stray worries about tomorrow or next week, or the eventual heat death of the universe, and then immediately forget what the worry was even about. This is just the mind walking a threshold, not fully awake, not fully dreaming, just pacing the border. You don't have to supervise that process. You don't have to track the narrative anymore, or remember which demon came from which text, or how many apocalypses we've mentioned so far. From here on, the words are just a background river. You can stand on the bank and listen, or you can step away and let it keep flowing without you. Either path is allowed. Either path leads down. So if your attention wants to drift, let it. If a sentence arrives half-heard and leaves unfinished, that's fine. We're going to keep talking about ancient evils for a while longer, but that's for the part of you that's still awake. The rest of you can follow the river where it's already going, toward quieter monsters, slower thoughts, and eventually no narrative at all, just sleep, doing its patient, cosmic work. If you're still awake, a quiet word about this channel, doing its patient, cosmic work. But if you're still here, still quietly riding the surface of the river, instead of sinking under it, that's all right. Some minds just take longer to power down. Some timelines coast in a holding pattern before they finally land. Think about that for a second. You've spent an entire day being conscious in a universe that does not come with an off switch. And now you're asking your brain to just stop. It's allowed to idle. Here is the thing. This channel exists for that idle state. Not quite awake, not quite gone. A kind of digital half at the center of time, where the firelight is made of myth and the crackling is long lore-heavy sentences about demons, dragons, and curses that you're only half listening to. We're going to keep building that fire, episode after episode, until your nervous system learns the pattern and starts to relax the moment you hear it. In this video, it was ancient evils. Chaos dragons like Tiamat dissolving into the architecture of reality. World serpents looping the horizon. Names carved into clay tablets that were once treated like a cosmic phone book of spirits. Next time, it might be a different corner of the multiverse. Underworld guardians, apocalypses that reset the universe instead of ending it, or the quiet power of a single forbidden word whispered in the wrong temple at the wrong time. Same energy, same slow uncoiling of fear into curiosity, and then into sleep. If you want more of that waiting for you on future nights, you can subscribe or bookmark, or just remember that somewhere on your device there is a doorway back to this little hearth. No urgency, no algorithmic panic. You do not have to decide right now. You can treat the button like one more minor household demon on a shelf. It will still be there tomorrow, perfectly content to be ignored, until you need it. And if, on some brighter afternoon, you feel like wandering back and leaving a comment, suggestions are welcome. Myths you grew up with. Demons whose names you've heard but never unpacked. Ancient curses, reality-bending texts, or that one under-the-bed presence you'd like to see gently defanged and filed under narrative instead of nightmare. But that is for later. You. Daylight you. The version of you with more hit points and better executive function. Right now, there is nothing to perform. No typing, no clicking, no choosing between videos in an infinite timeline of recommendations. From here on out, the sound will stay low and the pace will stay slow. Just a few more quiet stories about monsters losing their sharp edges, about evil with an expiration date, about a universe where even the darkest power eventually runs out of reasons to stay awake. You can let go. The narrative will keep watch while you don't. Tucking in the dragons, a final lullaby for ancient evils. So now, with the narrative keeping watch, we're going to do something quietly radical. We're going to put the monsters to bed before you. Not with a final battle, not with a cosmic wish that erases them from existence, but with something much smaller and stranger. A bedtime routine for ancient evils. Think about that for a second. Let's start with the ocean of chaos. The black foaming pre-creation sea where Tiamat once rose, all teeth and tide and unfocused rage. Watch that water now. The waves stop arguing with the shore. The wind forgets what it was angry about. Tiamat's coils loosen, not in defeat this time, but in exhaustion, like a parent who has finally run out of reasons to stay upright. She turns once, twice, then sinks into her own depths, becoming not a threat, just the heavy, slow breathing of the world under sleep. Far away, at the edge of the universe, Jörmungand feels the pressure ease. The world serpent has been clenching the horizon for so long that release feels like a rule violation. But here is the thing. Even a serpent that encircles the multiverse is still allowed to be tired. The tail slips from its mouth. The loop opens. He drifts, not drowning, just floating in the dark like a ring forgotten on a bedside table. His grip on reality relaxing until the timelines stop trembling. In the ruins and the doorways, in that specifically Adventure Time way where the cosmic and the domestic blur, the night demons start clocking out. The nameless ones who used to lean over cradles and thresholds remember there is no performance review for haunting. They curl up in the corners of old temples, under broken altars, inside cracked statues whose eyes no longer glow. They are still there, but they are background now, no more threatening than a coat on a chair that in daylight you recognize instantly. Below, where the underworld gates once yawned like open wounds in reality, the shift is ending. The guardians, all horns and eyes and rules, feel the last soul of the day pass through, and someone flips the metaphysical closed sign. The doors don't slam, they ease in, cushioned, until there's just a padded click you almost don't hear. One by one, the wardens lean their backs against the gates, armor creaking, many hands finally empty. Many eyes close, then a few more, then all of them. This is the secret rhythm of power. Even terror has office hours. Every curse, every dark name, every underworld contract was just a role in a very long play, and the actors are finally hanging their costumes on hooks in the dark. They are still shapes in the room of existence, but now they are just that, shapes. Familiar outlines your mind can walk around without flinching. You get the same permission. Whatever roles you've been holding today, hero, problem solver, warrior at the center of time, you can clock out with them. You don't have to defeat your inner monsters tonight. You can just give them a pillow. Let your anxieties lie down next to Jormungandr in the quiet dark. Let your intrusive thoughts curl up like those retired demons in the temple corners. Let the gate in your chest close with that same soft padded click. And as everything dangerous in this universe finally remembers how to rest, there is one last question waiting in the dark that we haven't asked yet. If the monsters are sleeping, who exactly is still guarding the door between one breath and the next? Drifting out of the story, the honest answer is no one. Once the monsters lie down and the priests clock out, and the last guardian god hangs a little closed for heat death sign on the universe, there is no one left on door duty except your own breathing. That tiny, quiet security system ticking away in the dark. So let's start there, at the smallest possible scale of power, the rise and fall of your chest. You don't have to change it. You don't have to deepen it or perfect it or optimize it like some cosmic breathing app. Just notice it. The way the air comes in on its own schedule, the way it leaves without needing a wish or a ritual. In, out. A tiny personal tide. Think about that for a second. The same universe that once imagined Tiamat and Jörmungandr also imagined the soft, repeating wave of your lungs. Here is the thing about tides. They move whether you pay attention or not. Your breath is doing that right now, rising, falling, like a private echo of those ancient oceans at the center of time, the ones we talked about when the multiverse was still wide awake and full of teeth. You don't have to steer it, you just get to float. Now we're going to let that tide wash through the rest of you, very lightly. No heroic quest, no boss battle, just a slow, wandering scan of the body you happen to be inhabiting in this particular timeline. Start at your forehead, where old names and old curses used to sit like carved tablets. Notice if the muscles there are still trying to hold back the universe. They don't have to. Let them smooth. Eyes, jaw, tongue resting heavy, neck, where a world serpent once wrapped around your spine in every myth you ever half remembered. Imagine its coils loosening, not with drama. With boredom, even the dragon is tired of holding your shoulders up. Let it slide away, ring by ring, until your arms remember gravity and your hands forget what they were supposed to be doing. Chest again, belly, back, hips, legs, all the way down to your toes, those tiny underworld guardians that have been clenching against cold floors and imagined apocalypses all day. They can clock out too. The rules of existence do not require them to stay tense while you listen to the end of a video. And if, right here, your thoughts start breaking apart a little, that's not a problem. That is the point. Maybe you only catch every third or fourth word now, like you're tuning a radio that keeps drifting between channels. The story is ending. The universe of this episode has already spent its big cosmic revelations. You are absolutely allowed to wander off before the last line. In fact, your mind has been practicing for this its entire life. Fragmenting, looping, replaying some demon name from Mesopotamia next to tomorrow's grocery list, next to the image of a dragon wearing reading glasses because it misfiled your fear in the admin department. That's fine. Let the continuity go. Reality can survive without you monitoring every frame. So the pacing widens, thoughts get more spacious, sentences get shorter, less to hold, more room to drift. There is no new law you have to memorize, no secret wish mechanic hiding in the credits, just this slow, blanketing sky of attention, with fewer and fewer stars to track. If sleep wants to arrive now, it can wear whatever myth makes the most sense to your nervous system. Maybe it's a quiet underworld where all the judges have stepped away from their desks and the rivers have turned into soft, humming conveyor belts that only move in the direction of rest. Maybe it's a coiled dragon around your bed, not guarding treasure, just preventing emails from entering your reality until morning. Maybe it's a starless sky, the kind the ancients feared, rendered harmless by the simple fact that you are horizontal and the universe, for once, does not need your opinion. In this video, we started with chaos and ended here, in this almost nothing, between one breath and the next. Between one word and the next. If the ancient evils return in your dreams, they have to follow your rules. Now, they have to be soft. They have to be slow. They have to wait their turn behind whatever gentle, unremarkable desire is carrying you out of this timeline and into sleep. When the story stops and the dream begins, and here is the thing, from this point on, the video is already mostly pretending. The story is still moving its mouth, the universe is still technically rendering frames, but for a lot of you, the real narrative has already slipped off the edge of the screen and down into the dark. You will never hear this sentence. Not fully. Not as a clean, continuous line of consciousness. It will break apart halfway through, dissolve into static, and then into whatever your brain decides to improvise in the back room of your existence. Think about that for a second, or at least pretend to, as you drift past it. For the few of you who are still awake with us at the center of time, we're going to keep the power level very low now. Just embers, just the glow of a universe cooling on the counter. The ancient evils have been named, catalogued like some Mesopotamian demon phone book, and gently filed away. The dragons, the serpents, the tempters, the curses, all on mute. Thank you for letting them keep you company in the dark. That is what they have always done, in that specifically Adventure Time way and in every other myth, from nights when people whispered about Tiamat under Babylonian stars, to nights when someone fell asleep mid-prayer, mid-curse, mid-wish for the morning to actually come. You are part of that same timeline now, same fear, same comfort, same slow exhale. So here is a small, tradition-free blessing smuggled in under the rules of the algorithm. May your sleep be deep, like a universe before its first thought. May your dreams be gentle, like a world serpent deciding, just for tonight, not to move. May your own ancient evils, whatever form they take, be quiet for a while. Not defeated, not erased, just off duty. If they come back tomorrow, that is fine, that is what they do. They rise, they fall, they reset the multiverse of your worries and start again. But not right now. Right now, nothing in your reality is urgent. No message, no headline, no apocalypse clock on the wall of the time room. The stories will still be here when you return, exactly where you dropped them, like a paused screen waiting for your eyes to open. In this video, we ran with cosmic horrors until they were out of breath and had to walk. Next time, if you want there to be a next time, we can pick up a different thread, a different monster, a different quiet corner of the universe. Or not. You don't have to decide. Let's start ending. Very slowly. Words getting softer. Gaps getting longer. Your attention stepping backward, out of this room, down the hallway of your mind, and into whatever landscape your dreams are already building behind you. We'll stay here, at the door. You can go on without us now.